A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
I still remember the way the fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting an unflattering glare on the cafeteria tables where our fates were sealed. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday in senior year, the last few months of freedom before we were thrust into the chaotic world of adulthood. But that day, they decided it would be fun to play a twisted game. You've heard of Survivor. Well, they turned our high school into a real-life version, but this wasn't some reality show where you can just walk away at the end. My name is Mia, and I was one of the unsuspecting players caught in a cruel game orchestrated by the very people I thought were my friends. The ringleader, a girl named Ashley, was your typical queen bee, gorgeous, charming, but with a dark underbelly that few dared to confront. Then there was Rachel, my once best friend, who followed Ashley like a shadow, her loyalty forever bound to the girl who wore popularity like a crown. I thought we were inseparable, the three of us, a trio that could weather any high school storm. That day, I arrived at the cafeteria with my heart racing, not from nerves but from the usual excitement of lunch with my friends. But when I spotted them at the center table, laughter bubbling between them like a cruel joke, I knew something was off. It was the glint in Ashley's eye, the one that promised a game I would have no interest in playing, yet here I was, standing at the edge, unable to turn away. The whispers began to swirl, igniting a wildfire of rumors I never imagined could consume me. Eliminate was the word they tossed around like it was some harmless game, but as I stood there, watching my so-called friends weave a narrative that would soon become my nightmare, I felt the ground shift beneath me. It was a typical high school move, the sort you see in movies. One moment you're in a group hug, and the next, you're staring down the barrel of social exile. I can still hear the laughter echoing in my mind, a haunting melody that taunted me while they picked off those who dared to stand in their way. I was the target, the unsuspecting lamb chosen for the slaughter, and it felt as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. The betrayal ignited a fire within me, hot and consuming, a fire that would not be extinguished until I had my revenge. They thought they were clever, but I was about to show them that you don't play with someone like me and expect to walk away unscathed. This was more than just a game, this was a war, and I was done being the victim. I was ready to reclaim my story, and when the smoke cleared, they would wish they had never underestimated me. As the weeks passed, the game didn't just unfold, it escalated into a brutal spectacle. It was like staring into the abyss of high school hell, where betrayal painted every wall, and trust lay shattered underfoot like broken glass. Each day felt heavier than the last, a thick fog of anxiety clouding my mind as I walked the halls. The whispers echoed louder, laughter rang hollow as it pierced my very being. Ashley and Rachel became masters of manipulation, wielding their influence like weapons. They turned friends into foes, creating a ripple effect that snaked through the school and engulfed anyone who dared to stand by my side. It was a clear message: choose your side wisely. Those who had once smiled at me in the hallways wore masks of fear instead, unwilling to risk their social standing for a girl they once called a friend. I became the social pariah, the punchline of their cruel game. But it wasn't just the isolation that hurt, it was the betrayal from the one person I would have trusted with my secrets, Rachel. My heart ached as I watched her swivel between tables, laughing at my expense, her allegiance torn without a second thought. It was as if the years of friendship we had shared, sleepovers filled with secrets, the late-night phone calls, the shared dreams, had evaporated into thin air. Each cruel jab they threw at me cut deeper as I saw her eyes light up with laughter, her loyalty exchanged for a fleeting moment of popularity. One day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon the ultimate betrayal, a video posted by Ashley, featuring a group of students gathered around a table in the park. They were all laughing, their eyes glittering with malicious joy, and there I was, the latest victim of their so-called eliminations. The caption read, "Guess who's next on the chopping block? #EliminateMia." It felt like a dagger through my heart, twisting painfully as I realized how far they were willing to go to make me the target of their sick game. The justification for their actions was absurd, pretending it was all in good fun, a social experiment, they called it. But I knew better, this wasn't fun. It was a systematic dismantling of my spirit, an artful dissection of everything I had built during those fragile teenage years. With every laugh, every whisper, they stripped away my dignity, leaving me exposed, fragile, and aching for reprisal. The anger swelled within me, igniting a need that clawed at my insides. I was no longer just the girl they targeted, I was a volcano ready to erupt. The thought of revenge became an obsession, a balm for the wounds they had inflicted. I began to plot, gathering the pieces of my plan while the world continued to see me as the victim. I would show them that I was not someone to be toyed with. I started by quietly gathering intel, documenting their every move, their weaknesses, the things they were most afraid of. I watched as Ashley reveled in her power, her facade of invincibility masking the cracks beneath. And Rachel, the once warm-hearted friend who had abandoned me for the allure of popularity, began to falter too. I could see the strain in her eyes, the guilt lurking just beneath the surface, and I knew I could exploit that. With calculated precision, I began to spread whispers of my own, subtle enough to seem spontaneous, but pointed enough to shift the tide. Did you hear what Rachel said about you? Ashley's not all she seems. The seeds of doubt slowly took root, bloomed as the once group of friends began to splinter. The tension within their circle became palpable, the cracks widening with every passing day. I watched with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow as the two girls, who once reveled in their cruelty, began to turn on each other. My heart raced at the sight of Ashley's confidence wavering, her glare sharp enough to cut glass when Rachel dared to question her authority. One afternoon, while I sat alone in the library, I overheard Rachel confiding in another girl, her voice tinged with regret. I didn't want it to go this far, you know. I thought it was just a joke. I hushed my breath, trying to stay unnoticed as I clutched my notebook tightly, a million thoughts swirling in my head. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chink in their armor. I decided to plant a seed of discord that would blossom into chaos. The next morning, I compiled a series of screenshots from previous group chats, messages that exposed their plans to eliminate me, their laughter dripping with malice. I sent them anonymously to the students who had once idolized Ashley and Rachel, the ones who surrounded them like loyal subjects. I watched intently as the whispers began to take root, spreading like wildfire through the halls. The laughter that once echoed around them transformed into murmurs of concern, growing louder as the days went on. Ashley soon found herself on the defensive, her royal demeanor cracking under the weight of scrutiny. "Mia's just jealous," I heard her claim in a desperate attempt to regain her throne as the queen bee. But no one was buying it anymore. I could see her strutting down the hallway, her confidence faltering with every passing glance that suggested disbelief. The thrill of watching her unravel was intoxicating, but it came with a heavy heart. I had once loved that girl like a sister. But my revenge didn't end there. I started to expose more than just their cruel games. I tapped into the secrets I had carefully collected, Rachel's anxiety about her grades, Ashley's hidden fear of being unmasked as a fraud when it came to her beauty and charm. I spread rumors that hinted at the cracks in their carefully constructed facades, embellishing the truth just enough to make it sting. "Did you hear about Rachel? I heard she's failing math. I'm pretty sure Ashley is going to drop her the moment her GPA slips." The tables had turned, and suddenly, Rachel was the one getting snubbed in the halls, her old friends whispering behind her back, unsure if it was safe to associate with her. The look of confusion in her eyes as she searched for answers turned the knife deeper, and I struggled with the guilt that threatened to invade my triumph. "Why are you doing this, Mia?" Rachel confronted me one day as we crossed paths in the parking lot. "I thought we were friends?" Her voice trembled, and I could see the hurt reflected in her eyes, yet I stood firm. "You chose your side, Rachel. You decided that I was nothing more than a game to be played. I'm just returning the favor. The air between us crackled with tension as I turned to walk away, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me like a wave. But the moment I stepped away, I felt a surge of power rush through me. This was no longer just about retribution. I was reclaiming my narrative, my identity, and it was exhilarating. But as the days turned into weeks, the situation spiraled even further. It began with an unnerving feeling one evening as I sat in my bedroom, shadows lengthening across the walls. I was scrolling through social media when I stumbled upon a picture Ashley had posted. In it, she was surrounded by the remnants of her kingdom, smiling friends, laughter frozen in time, their eyes glinting with their shared cruelty. I couldn't shake off the sense of violation that washed over me. How could they mock me so openly, having turned our bond into a public spectacle? But what struck me the most wasn't the betrayal, it was the realization that Ashley was losing her grip. The comments beneath her photo, once filled with adoration, were now peppered with uncertainty. Isn't this a little mean? Mia really didn't deserve this. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I reveled in the bittersweet joy of witnessing their downfall. That night, I felt the scars of emotional pain morph into something sharper, more visceral, a relentless craving for vindication. I replayed the moments when I had been the punchline, the victim of their twisted humor. With every flashback, the embers of anger ignited into a raging fire of determination. I could either let their actions define me, or I could rise from the ashes like a phoenix, wielding my pain as a weapon. My resolve crystallized in that moment. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch as they tore me apart, I was going to make them feel the weight of their actions. I was going to show them that I was more than a mere target, I was a force to be reckoned with. The thrill of revenge surged through my veins, electrifying me as I began to carve out my plan, one that would draw them into a trap of their making. The next day, I made my move. I approached a few trusted classmates, those who had been sidelined in Ashley's cutthroat game, and hinted at a gathering, a party at my place to reconnect in a stress-free environment. It was a ruse, a way to lure Ashley and Rachel into a situation where their guard would be down. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they could laugh and mock without consequences. The night of the gathering, I made sure everything was perfectly orchestrated. I lit candles in my dimly lit living room, played soft music in the background, and created an atmosphere that dripped with nostalgia. As friends trickled in, I greeted them with warm smiles, hiding the storm, brewing beneath the surface. I could feel the anticipation buzzing in the air, and it thrilled me. As I watched the door open and Ashley walk in, her confidence radiating as she greeted the room, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. She was about to step into the trap that I had laid for her. Rachel followed closely behind, her eyes darting nervously around the room, still clinging to the remnants of her old self, the girl who had once been my best friend. As the night wore on, laughter enveloped us like a warm blanket, but beneath it, tension simmered, waiting to explode. I had orchestrated a series of games, innocent enough on the surface, but heavily laced with covert references that would reveal the truth about their actions. "Let's play truth or dare," I suggested, a sly grin spreading across my face. The first few rounds were light-hearted, filled with silly dares and innocent questions. But then I turned to Ashley, my gaze unwavering. "Truth or dare?" "Dare," she said, probably thinking she could handle whatever came her way. The room quieted, and a smirk curled on my lips. "I dare you to tell us a secret that no one knows about you," I said, my voice dripping with sweetness. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the confidence cracking just a bit. "Fine. I'll go first," she said, her tone defensive. "I keep my grades up not just because I study hard, but because I pay someone to take my tests." A wave of surprise washed over the room, some students gasped, while others giggled nervously. But I could see the glint of panic in Ashley's eyes. She had unknowingly fired the first shot in a battle no one saw coming. With the momentum swinging, I continued to guide the game. Rachel, your turn. Truth or dare? She hesitated, glancing at Ashley for support. Truth, she finally decided, her voice barely above a whisper. Tell us why you really decided to side with Ashley, I prompted, pushing deeper. The room held its breath, the energy thickening with anticipation. Rachel fidgeted, her face shifting from defiance to vulnerability. I thought if I stayed close to Ashley, I'd be safe. That I wouldn't be the next target. Her admission rang out, slicing through the remnants of her bravado. Whispers flitted through the crowd, and I could see realization dawning on a few faces. Rachel, too, was a victim of the queen bee's reign of terror. As the game progressed, I made sure to intertwine personal truths that turned the air electric. I threw in dares that forced them to confront the very pain they had inflicted upon me. When one student had the audacity to cry out, "Dare Ashley to say something nice about Mia," I seized the moment. Great idea. Ashley's face fell, the audacity of the suggestion hitting her like a brick. But she was cornered, and I watched as she forced a smile. Mia. She exists. The laughter around the room was hollow, but it was a calculated jab that cut deep. I could see the discomfort ripple across her face, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly extinguished by the thrill of the moment. The evening reached a crescendo when I introduced the ultimate game changer, an open mic session for confessions. Let's all share one confession from our time in high school. It can be funny, embarrassing, or revealing. Everyone shifted nervously, eyes darting, but I could see the mounting pressure. They had tossed me into the pit of public humiliation, it was time to turn the tables. One after another, students shared their secrets. Laughter rang out, but with each confession, I could feel the weight of Ashley's defiance crumbling. Finally, I stood up, my heart pounding. I'll go, I said, injecting enthusiasm into my voice. I confess that I was once proud to call Ashley my friend, but I no longer recognize her. The girl I knew would never hide behind a group to tear others down. She's lost herself in this cruel game of elimination. I paused, letting the words sink in. And Rachel, I know you thought you were doing what was best for you, but you sold out our friendship for a taste of popularity. You threw me to the wolves without a second thought. Gasps surged through the crowd, and at that moment, I saw their eyes turn from me to the duo who had orchestrated my downfall. The laughter quickly transformed the silence that ensued was thick and suffocating, like a tidal wave that crashed upon the shore, leaving behind the wreckage of what once was. I felt the eyes of my peers, once my friends, now uncertain witnesses to the unraveling of two people who had thought their power was unassailable. I stood there, my heart racing, the weight of my confession heavy yet liberating, my voice echoing through the tension. Ashley's face was an amalgam of shock and fury, her mask slipping as the realization set in that the very game she had orchestrated was now backfiring spectacularly. "How dare you," she spat, her voice rising to a shrill pitch, and it was like watching the queen bee lose her throne, her crown toppling into the dirt. "I dare you to tell them why you really started this game, Ashley." I pressed, the room buzzing with anticipation. I could feel the energy shifting, the collective breath of my classmates hanging in the air like a fragile thread. For a moment, she hesitated, caught between her pride and the pressure of the crowd. But Rachel, seemingly freed by my courage, piped up, "You started this because you were afraid. You were afraid of being forgotten, of not being the center of attention." Her voice cracked with emotion, and the power dynamics shifted once more, her own vulnerability cutting through the facade Ashley had built. "Shut up, Rachel. You don't even know what you're talking about." Ashley shot back, her gaze flicking nervously from Rachel to me, and then over the sea of judgmental faces that now surrounded her. I could see the facade straining, the cracks widening as the pressure built. But I wasn't done yet. "Oh, but I do know, Ashley. I know that you're terrified of being seen as human, flawed. But guess what? We all are, And hiding behind a throne built on the misery of others doesn't make you a queen, it makes you a tyrant. The words dripped with a bittersweet satisfaction, and I reveled in the truth spilling forth, freeing me from the chains of their mockery. The room erupted in murmurs, some students nodding in agreement while others watched with wide eyes, hungry for more. I know the truth hurts, but this is what happens when you make others your scapegoats, I continued, my voice unwavering. You think it's funny to humiliate someone, but it isn't. It's cruel, and guess what? The world isn't going to treat you kindly when you play God. As I stood there, a rush of adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could feel the power shifting, the tides turning. I could see the way the other students began to subtly distance themselves from Ashley. The whispers had morphed from doubts about me, the exiled one, to questioning Ashley's integrity. Did you hear how she's bullied Mia? One whispered. Maybe she doesn't deserve to be so high and mighty, murmured another. Ashley's expression morphed from rage to panic, and I could sense her desperation. You think this is going to change anything? You think you've won? I'm still popular, and everyone will forget about you, Mia. She shot back, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The facade was crumbling, she no longer exuded the confidence she once had. Is this really what you want to be remembered for? I asked, letting the question hang in the air. Is popularity worth losing your humanity? At that moment the days following that explosive night felt surreal, like waking up from a fever dream. The laughter and whispers echoed in my mind, but now they were different, charged with a newfound power. I could hardly believe how quickly the tides had turned. I had successfully exposed the cruel reign of Ashley and Rachel, and in the process, I had reclaimed my identity. Yet, the aftermath brought with it a storm of emotions I hadn't anticipated. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at school shifted dramatically. Ashley, once the untouchable queen bee, became the subject of hushed conversations and pointed glances. Her carefully constructed facade cracked under the pressure, and I could see the cracks in her confidence widen as she struggled to regain her footing. It was as though the very foundation of her popularity had been shaken loose, and I watched as the stragglers, the friends who had once rallied around her like loyal subjects, began to drift away. They whispered about how Ashley had crossed the line, how I had been treated unfairly, and how they couldn't support someone who thrived on cruelty. Rachel, on the other hand, was something of a tragic figure. She had fallen from grace, her betrayal overshadowed by the fallout of Ashley's unraveling. The very friends who had once adored her began to distance themselves, unsure of where they stood between the two of us. I saw her in the halls, her eyes cast down, a haunting reminder of the bond we had once shared. The guilt I had tried to bury resurfaced, clawing at my conscience. Had I truly wanted this for her? As the days unfolded, I was met with sympathy from unexpected places. Fellow students I had never spoken to before approached me, sharing their own stories of hurt and betrayal. We formed an unspoken alliance of sorts, united by the scars of high school politics. These new connections felt like a balm to the wounds I had carried for so long. But it also left me feeling conflicted. Hadn't I orchestrated this chaos, begun this war? I couldn't escape the nagging guilt that crept in late at night. Was revenge worth it? Had I become the very monster I had sought to destroy? Each time I caught a glimpse of Ashley or Rachel, their expressions mirroring confusion, regret, and even pain, a wave of remorse washed over me. I had wanted them to feel what I felt, but did they deserve this kind of suffering? One afternoon, I found myself in the library, lost in thought, when I overheard a group of students talking about what had transpired. They were dissecting the fallout with a mixture of intrigue and sympathy. It's crazy how quickly things can change, one girl said. Just one night, and now Ashley's the one on the outside looking in. I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction at her words, but then it hit me, a chilling realization. What if one day, I am the one isolated? I thought. What if the darkness I had embraced became my only companion? The following weeks became a mix of triumph and introspection. I began to navigate my new reality cautiously, aware that while I had gained strength, I had also lost something precious in the process. I had shifted from being a victim to a warrior, but at what cost? Then came the day of the school assembly, where a discussion on bullying and social responsibility was on the agenda. I sat in my seat, heart racing, as the principal took the stage. "Today, we address an issue that affects many of us," he said, his voice steady. "We need to acknowledge that,
you know that feeling when you're trapped in a nightmare, yet every morning, you wake up to find it was just a dream, and the world feels normal again? That's how my life felt for the last 2 years, like a waking nightmare where I was both the prisoner and the spectator. The routine of scrolling through my phone, listening to friends laugh, sharing stories over coffee, all felt like empty gestures, a facade I wore like a tight-fitting mask while chaos brewed beneath. It was in the heart of our small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, that my life took a sharp turn into darkness. I was just a regular girl, Emma, 25, a freelance graphic designer, addicted to the smell of fresh paint and the thrill of creating something beautiful. My days were filled with colors, textures, and my beloved cat, Whiskers, who seemed to sense the weight of my heart even before I did. But all of that changed the moment Lily stepped back into my life. Lily, my childhood best friend turned trusted confidant turned treacherous foil, was nothing short of a tornado. She swept in with her whirlwind charm, her laughter echoing like music, intoxicating and contagious. She had a way of lighting up a room, drawing people into her orbit as if she held the sun in her hands. For years, I stood by her side, our bond seemingly unbreakable, until I learned that loyalty, in her eyes, was a mere stepping stone on her path to success. It began quietly, whispers in the shadows of our friendship, hidden glances, casual lies. I brushed them off, convinced I was paranoid. She would never do that to me, I thought, clinging to the memories of our carefree youth, tossing our hair back as we danced in the rain, dreaming of futures filled with endless possibilities. But every smile she wore began to feel like a mask, and every compliment she offered dripped with insincerity. The day my world shattered was a rainy Thursday, the kind where the sky weeps for the lost. I was hunched over my laptop, the sound of rain pattering against the window blending with the soft hum of my favorite playlist. A message slid onto my screen, unsuspecting, from a mutual friend. "Did you hear what Lily did?" In that moment, the air thickened, suffocating me as I read the words again and again, each syllable carving deeper into my gut. Betrayal. Unforgivable betrayal. She had taken my designs, my ideas, everything I'd poured my heart into, and claimed them as her own. In a moment, the laughter faded, the colors dulled, and the world I had known twisted into something sinister. The betrayal stung, yes, but it was the realization of her true nature that felt like a knife twisting in my back. She thought she had me. But I was more than just the girl she toyed with, I was a storm waiting to break free. Now, I sit here, ready to embrace the tempest within me. I want you to know that revenge doesn't always mean fire and fury. Sometimes, it's the silent, calculated precision of a mind that has awakened. The clock is ticking, and change is coming. What she's about to find out is that I've been watching, waiting for my moment to strike back. It's time to show her that she never really knew me at all. The days following that fateful Thursday morphed into a blur of disbelief and devastation. I felt like a ghost, floating through life, unseen, unheard. I remember the conversations I had with myself, the argument playing out in my mind like an unending loop. How could she? My heart raced, pumping indignation through my veins. I replayed every interaction we'd shared, seeking clues hidden in her laughter, signs of the duplicity lurking beneath her charming facade. But all I could see was the girl I had loved like a sister, the one who'd confided her dreams to me, who had promised to stand by my side no matter what. Maybe I misunderstood, I would whisper to Whiskers, cradling him in my arms as if he could mend my broken heart. This can't be real. But reality has a way of crashing in, hard and unyielding. She didn't just steal my designs, she stole my trust, my self-esteem, and my perception of who I was. As the days wore on, I felt my anger morph into something darker. The more I thought about it, the more clarity emerged. She thrived on the chaos she created. I couldn't shake the image of her reveling in her success, filled with glee as she presented my work to our friends, smiling as if she had birthed those ideas herself. I envisioned those moments, her eyes sparkling with excitement, the way she laughed, her voice bubbling over with triumph at the very expense of my heartbreak. Why didn't I see it? I cried out one night, my voice cracking as I scrolled through her social media posts, each one a reminder of what she had done. Her glowing self-portraits, her exaggerated captions celebrating her newfound fame in the design world, all built on the back of my labor. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, gasping for air, yet suffocated by the weight of her deception. I began to dissect the timeline of our friendship. The moments I had thought were genuine were now tainted. I could almost hear her voice ringing in my ears, "You're so talented, Emma. You deserve to be recognized." How ironic, now that I knew she had been working behind my back all along. The thought of her feigning support, all while plotting my professional demise, ignited a fire in me. How dare she underestimate me? It was at that moment of despair that clarity struck like lightning. I realized I couldn't allow this betrayal to define me. I was not just a victim, I was a creator, an architect of my own fate. If she thought she had me cornered, I would show her just how wrong she was. So, I hatched a plan. An intricate tapestry woven with threads of strategy and patience. I would reclaim my power, brick by brick. My first step was to gather evidence. I meticulously documented every design I had created, every email that confirmed my authorship, every conversation that highlighted my ideas. I became a detective in my own story, lurking in the shadows of my former life, collecting the pieces that would serve as my armor in the war to come. The anger transformed into a cool, calculated resolve. I envisioned confronting her, the way the balance of power would shift as I laid out my evidence. The thought of her face going pale, her charming smile fading into confusion and fear sent a thrill down my spine. She thinks she's invincible, untouchable. But she doesn't realize that the person she betrayed has been watching, preparing for this moment as the days turned into weeks. The plan that once flickered like a spark began to flame into something tangible. Yet, everything began to unravel in ways I never expected, intensifying the emotional turmoil that coursed through my veins. My world felt like a ticking time bomb, and every interaction with Lily would send shockwaves through my chest, reminding me of her betrayal. I remember one afternoon, walking into our usual coffee shop, the familiar scent of freshly brewed espresso wrapping around me like a warm embrace. My heart raced as I approached the counter, scanning the room for her. There she was, seated at our corner table, surrounded by a group of admirers, each word she spoke blossoming into laughter as they leaned closer, drawn to her magnetic charm. I felt the heat rise within me, churning with a mix of anger and humiliation. This was our place, I thought bitterly. But now, it felt like a stage, and she was its star, basking in the spotlight of my former warmth. As I turned to leave, I heard her voice, laced with false sweetness, "Emma. Come join us." I hesitated, my pulse quickening. She's trying to bait me. The very thought sent chills down my spine. I could sense the amusement in the way she called my name, her friend's curious eyes darting back and forth as if anticipating a showdown. But I held my ground, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, muttering something about having plans. As I stepped outside, each breath felt like jagged glass in my throat, rough and unforgiving. Those small moments became my daily struggle. Each time I ran into her, either at social gatherings or simply passing by on the street, it felt like a reminder of my defeat. She wore her newfound success like a crown, flaunting it with a carelessness that stung. The isolation crept in. Friends began to distance themselves, torn between loyalty to me and the allure of her charm. "You guys should just work it out," they'd say, as if they couldn't see the chasm of betrayal that had formed between us. I felt their dismissive words ricochet through my mind as if I were the one being unreasonable. One evening, I received a text from Lisa, one of our mutual friends. "I didn't want to say anything, but I was at this event last night where Lily presented her designs, and she mentioned you in passing. She said you were just a stepping stone in her journey." I stared at my phone in disbelief, the words blurring as tears threatened to spill. It was as if every ounce of dignity I had left was stripped away, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I thought I was stronger than this, I berated myself, but the humiliation felt like a shackle, binding me to my pain. I couldn't escape the feeling of being isolated, of being betrayed not only by her but by the people I once called friends, who failed to recognize the gravity of her actions. The more they celebrated her, the more I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that no longer welcomed me. The weight of it all became unbearable. My art, once my sanctuary, turned into a battleground. I'd sit at my desk for hours, staring blankly at the canvas, my creativity stifled by a thick fog of resentment and despair. I could hear her voice echoing in my mind, taunting me. "Look at you now, Emma. You're nothing without me." I was losing trust, and it was a quiet night, the kind where the world felt shrouded in a blanket of stillness, and the only sound was the rhythmic pitter-patter of rain against my window, a natural lullaby that usually lulled my tortured mind to a place of solace. But that night, it sat heavy in my chest, too loud, too insistent. I had been scrolling through social media yet again, staring numbly at another one of Lily's posts, glorifying her latest triumph, her smile as bright as the neon lights that illuminated her carefully curated life. She had just been featured in an article spotlighting young designers to watch, and I felt the familiar pang of hurt flare up as I read the words. Innovative and bold, they referred to her, and I couldn't help but think of the countless hours I spent brainstorming and drafting designs she would ultimately claim as her own. I turned off my phone, tossing it aside as if it were a toxic object, and tried to breathe through the knot forming in my stomach. But the darkness loomed, suffocating me with a heavy blanket of rage and humiliation. Why can't I just move on? I asked myself, the question feeling like a cruel taunt echoing back at me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that I wanted to move on, I wanted justice. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, the pain she inflicted on me. That was when the final straw shattered my fragile resolve. It was late, and I found myself curled up on the couch with Whiskers purring softly beside me. The television flickered in the background, a mindless show that I couldn't fully focus on. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door, unexpected and jarring. I glanced at the clock, it was nearly 10. I opened it to find Lisa standing there, her expression serious and urgent. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Lily." My heart raced, anticipation and dread mixing into an intoxicating cocktail of emotions. "What's happened?" I asked, ushering her in and closing the door behind us. As she spoke, I felt the walls of my reality begin to crumble, her words steady but heavy. "I just got off the phone with a mutual friend who works at the magazine. Apparently, Lily has been spreading lies about you to anyone who will listen. She's claiming that you were never a significant part of her creative process, that you were merely a helper, always in her shadow. She's trying to erase you from the story of her success." I could feel my stomach drop, like I had been punched hard in the gut. She's really doing it, I thought. She was continuing to rewrite our history, consolidating her power by poisoning the minds of those who had once loved me too. In that moment, all the hurt, the confusion, and the betrayal coalesced into a single, crystalline thought: this has gone too far. I looked at Lisa, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and resolve. I can't just let her do this to me. I need to show her that I'm not the weak link she thinks I am. Lisa's eyes widened, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "What are you planning?" I could feel the shift within me, something had awakened. The fear that had plagued me for months faded as clarity took its place. No more playing the victim. No more letting her define my narrative. The storm brewing inside me wasn't just a passing squall, it was a full. I sat there, heart pounding, the storm within me crashing against the walls of my mind as my thoughts coalesced into an intricate plan. I needed to be methodical, careful. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was determined to make it a masterpiece. The very first step. Gather my evidence, not just for vindication, but to expose the truth in a way that would reverberate throughout our small town. 1. Collect evidence. I went into detective mode, compiling every email, text message, and sketch that proved my contributions to our projects. I created a digital portfolio that showcased my original designs, complete with timestamps and the context behind each creation. I wanted to create an undeniable narrative of my work, one that she could not twist or deny. Every piece would serve as a testament to the truth, my truth. 2. Enlist allies. I reached out to a few trusted friends who had been with us since the beginning of our friendship. I shared everything with them, emphasizing the importance of their support. I needed them to remember the moments when I'd shared my ideas and designs before Lily ever had a chance to claim them. By reminding them of our shared past, I could turn them into my witnesses, people who would stand by my side when the time came to confront her. 3. Study Lily's moves. It was crucial to understand Lily's routines, her social circles, and how she presented herself to the world. I began attending the same events she did, lurking in the background, observing how she interacted with others and the narratives she spun. With each passing day, I took notes. The more I understood her strategies, the better positioned I would be to dismantle them. Knowledge is power, after all. 4. Create a counter-narrative. Inspired by the materials I collected, I started to craft my own narrative. I began writing a blog, one that highlighted the importance of originality in art and the value of collaboration. I framed it loosely around my experiences of betrayal in the creative world, embedding subtle references to my journey with Lily. My blog would start getting traction, creating a community of supporters who resonated with my story. 5. The art show reveal. The pièce de résistance of my plan was the idea of hosting an art show. I reached out to a local gallery and booked a date, planning to unveil my collection. But this show wouldn't just be an exhibition of my work, it would be the stage for my revenge. I decided to release a limited edition of prints that illustrated the designs she had stolen, each one meticulously crafted to tell my story, from conceptual sketches to final pieces, spotlighting my creativity and hard work. 6. Public announcement. I planned the moment of revelation carefully. The night of my art show would coincide with the reveal of Lily's next big project launch, which I had learned through the grapevine. As she basked in her glory, I would make my entrance, boldly announcing my collection while subtly highlighting the designs Lily had stolen. Through a speech woven with poignant insights, I would ensure that everyone present understood the truth. I envisioned the shift in the room when the audience connected the dots, her laughter fading as whispers erupted in disbelief around us. 7. Prepare for backlash. I knew that Lily wouldn't take this lying down. I braced myself for her attempts to discredit me or to flip the narrative. I prepped myself for confrontations, collecting testimonies from friends who witnessed her betrayal. I would be ready to counter any lies with facts. I also secured a short video the night of the art show had arrived, and the energy thrummed through the air like an electric current, crackling with anticipation. I stood backstage, my heart racing as I peered through the curtains at the crowd filling the gallery. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers poured in, all there to witness the unveiling of my collection. But amidst them, I was acutely aware of one looming presence, Lily. She had been buzzing about the space, her laugh echoing like a siren call, as she flaunted her own designs that had been birthed from my stolen ideas. I could almost sense the magnetic shift in the room as she entered. Her confidence radiated like a beacon, drawing people closer, eager to drink from her well of charm. I swallowed hard, forcing down the tidal wave of nausea that threatened to engulf me. She thought she had me. But tonight, I would reclaim my narrative. The moment I stepped out onto the stage, the audience's chatter died down, eyes locking onto me as if I were the sun breaking through a cloudy sky. I took a deep breath, feeling every heartbeat reverberate through me. The spotlight was bright, but I welcomed it. The warmth that had once terrified me now felt like a cloak of power. "Welcome, everyone," I began, my voice steady, cutting through the silence. "Tonight, I'm excited to share not just my art, but also a story. A story about creativity, trust, and the importance of authenticity." I could see Lily in the crowd, her smile faltering as she registered the shift in my tone. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Good. With every word, I felt my resolve harden. I unveiled my collection piece by piece, each design a brushstroke of my truth. "These prints represent not just my artistic vision but my journey through betrayal," I declared, gesturing to the first piece, a vibrant explosion of colors that embodied my pain and resilience. "These are the designs that once belonged to me, the ideas that were stolen and repurposed as someone else's innovative triumph." Gasps rippled through the audience as they turned to look at Lily, who stood frozen, the blood draining from her face. I could feel my pulse quicken, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, urging me on. This was it, the moment of poetic justice. The very foundation of artistry is rooted in honesty, I continued, my voice unwavering as I pointed to the next piece, an intricate sketch that mirrored my despair. When you betray that honesty, you not only steal a person's work, you strip them of their identity. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable buzz of disbelief hanging in the air. I reveled in it, every gasp, every murmur. I had the audience, and I knew it. They were hungry for the truth, just as I had been when I first learned of my betrayal. I glanced at Lily, whose eyes were wide, darting from me to the crowd, panic etched across her features. The designs you've admired tonight come with a backstory, a truth that many don't know, I continued, my gaze locking onto hers. This was never just a fairy tale of friendship. It was a battlefield of deceit. With a flip of the switch, I projected a slideshow behind me, a digital timeline of our friendship juxtaposed against the designs she had claimed as her own. Emails, sketches, and candid photographs scrolled across the screen, evidence that illuminated the dark corners of our past. Murmurs grew louder, confusion morphed the air and the gallery crackled with tension, every gasp and murmur mingling together into a dissonant symphony. As the images flickered across the screen, I felt a rush of satisfaction wash over me, like the tide turning after a long storm. I glanced at Lily, whose face had transformed from shock to fury, her carefully curated facade cracking and crumbling as the truth unfolded before her like an open wound. In that moment, I had never felt more alive. I had reclaimed my narrative, exposing her lies like a bright light piercing through the darkness. The audience, once captivated by her charm, now turned their bewildered gazes towards her. I reveled in the look of disbelief written across their faces, a look that mirrored the devastation I had felt for months. I could see whispers rising, questions weaving through the crowd like a chain reaction, and I knew the tide had shifted irreversibly. As the presentation concluded, I stepped down from the stage, my heart racing with exhilaration while my mind buzzed with disbelief at what I had just accomplished. Friends swarmed around me, offering their congratulations and support, their voices a harmonic echo of what I had lost and what I was starting to reclaim. Lisa squeezed my arm, her eyes gleaming with pride as she whispered, "You did it, Emma. You showed her." But amidst the applause and the newfound warmth of my friends, I felt a chill creep up my spine. As I turned to look for Lily, I caught sight of her retreating figure, swallowed by the crowd, her expression a tempest of rage and humiliation. For a moment, the satisfaction of my victory dimmed. I had laid bare the truth, but what awaited her outside the gallery? What would become of her when the echoes of my revelations faded? The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. My art had gained unexpected recognition, each piece I showcased becoming a testament to resilience and power. My blog garnered traction, resonating with those who had felt the sting of betrayal and the weight of stolen dreams. People reached out, eager to share their stories, inspired by my strength to confront my past. I had found my voice again, and it felt intoxicating, like a new dawn breaking over a once dark landscape. Yet, as I stood in my studio, surrounded by the colors I had poured my soul into, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered. I had avenged myself, I had exposed the truth, but with it came an unexpected weight. I realized that revenge, while cathartic, did not heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon me. The thrill of the moment had masked the deeper scars that remained, scars that would take time, patience, and self-love to heal. One evening, I was deep in thought, my paintbrush hovering over a canvas, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was a screenshot of a post Lily had made, a public statement, brimming with indignation and victimhood. "This is not the end," she declared, framing herself as the wronged artist, one whose work had been misrepresented by someone she once called a friend. Her words dripped with manipulation, and in that moment, I felt a stab of frustration mixed with pity. She still doesn't get it, I thought, recognizing the cycle of blame she was attempting to perpetuate. I had thought that exposing her would bring clarity, but instead, it only revealed the depths of her delusion. Days turned to weeks, and whispers in our small town began to shift. The narrative of betrayal became a cautionary tale of, "It was a night like any other when my world began to unravel. I remember sitting on my bed, the faint glow of my fairy lights flickering against the walls of my small studio apartment.
It was supposed to feel cozy, the kind of sanctuary where I could escape the chaos of life. But that night, the laughter I'd shared with friends earlier faded into a haunting silence, and my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. His name was Alex. We had been together for 2 years, and I thought I knew him inside and out. He was charming, with that effortless smile that could light up a room and a way of making me feel like I was the only person that mattered in the universe. I fell for him hard, lost in the whirlwind of young love and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. But beneath that charming facade, something much darker lurked, hidden away like a secret I was too naive to see. Our relationship had started off like a dream: dinner dates, spontaneous road trips, and quiet evenings cuddled up on the couch. But as the months rolled by, little things began to change. The late-night texts, the sudden need for space, and the way he'd look at his phone, eyes darting away whenever I walked into the room, it was as if I was watching a slow-motion train wreck, powerless to stop it. I dismissed my instincts, brushing them off as paranoia or insecurities. But the night I received that message, everything came crashing down. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the words carved through me like a knife. "You deserve to know, he's been seeing someone else. And I think you should get tested." My heart raced, disbelief morphing into a painful knot in my stomach. As if that wasn't enough, the weight of the additional revelation crushed me: an STD. The words echoed in my mind, words that felt like they were written in blood. An infection. A betrayal that went beyond anything I could have imagined. In that moment, the comfort of my little sanctuary felt suffocating. I tossed the phone aside and buried my face in my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. Anger coursed through my veins like fire, mingled with an intense sense of betrayal. How could he? After everything we shared, how could he do this to me? I felt the dizzying spiral of heartbreak, betrayal, and rage culminating in one searing truth: I needed to take back control. And so, I made a promise to myself that night, a promise to reclaim my power, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the pain I felt. I was done being a victim, and I was ready to make him pay for every lie, every hidden moment, and every ounce of trust he shattered. This is my story. A tale of heartbreak and discovery, but also one of cunning revenge. Truth be told, when the dust finally settles, you're about to learn that sometimes the most powerful weapon you can wield is the truth itself. The next few days passed in a haze, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. I remember lying awake through the early hours, heart racing while replaying every memory I had of Alex, dissecting them like a forensic analyst trying to find clues to a crime he hadn't seen coming. I felt sick thinking about the intimate moments we shared, the laughter, the late-night confessions, the promises made under the starlit sky. All those memories felt tainted now, poisoned by his betrayal. I was spiraling. The image of him with someone else, laughing and kissing her. Did he kiss her the way he kissed me? Did he whisper sweet nothings in her ear, just like he used to do with me? The jealousy clawed at my insides, tearing through the pain like a vengeful beast. But it wasn't just jealousy, it was the crushing weight of humiliation. I felt like an absolute fool, a marionette dancing on strings he'd yanked with careless abandon. After a long, sleepless night, I finally mustered the courage to see a doctor. The sterile smell of the clinic was a stark contrast to the chaos roiling in my mind, and when the nurse handed me the results, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. There it was, a diagnosis that would forever change the way I viewed intimacy, the way I viewed trust. I felt like I was holding a ticking time bomb. The bomb was my heart, and the countdown to my revenge had officially begun. It was time to confront him. I set a plan in motion, fueled by righteous anger and a burning desire for revenge. I texted Alex, craftily crafting my words to sound casual. "Hey, can we talk? There's something important I need to discuss." When he replied almost immediately, giddy and eager, it was like a switch flipped inside me. I was no longer that vulnerable girl who had given her heart to him. The vulnerability was replaced by a cold, steely resolve. He suggested we meet at our favorite cafe, and I could already picture the look on his face when everything unraveled. The thought of the confrontation sent a thrill through me, the sweet taste of poetic justice. As I sat at the cafe, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. The people around me were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside, but I was center stage in my own personal play, and I was ready for my monologue. Finally, the door swung open, and there he was, bright-eyed and unaware. It took everything within me not to smile at his unsuspecting demeanor. "Hey!" he beamed, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look different. Everything okay?" That innocent concern almost made my blood boil. "Everything's just peachy, Alex," I said, barely hiding the sarcasm that dripped from my words. "In fact, I just got back from the doctor." His brow furrowed in confusion as I watched the color drain from his face when I revealed the truth. "What do you mean?" he stuttered, a mixture of shock and panic flashing in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, relishing the moment. "You know exactly what I mean. I got a message from someone who knows you better than I did. They told me to get tested, and guess what I found out?" The reality of what I was saying hit him like a freight train. I relished the way his confident demeanor crumbled before me like a house of cards. "You're being dramatic," he finally muttered, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his efforts to maintain composure. The facade was slipping, and I didn't need his admission to know I had him cornered. "I'm being dramatic?" I echoed, my tone low and dangerous. "You think this is a joke? Do you even realize the implications of what you've done? You gave me an STD, Alex. You cheated on me. You shattered the trust I had in you, in us." His jaw clenched, and the color drained from his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he mumbled, but the feeble apology rang hollow. It was too late for remorse, it fell flat against the weight of my anger. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that seemed to echo in the otherwise cozy cafe. "You think that excuses everything? You think you can just sweep your betrayals under the rug because you didn't plan it out? You're a coward, Alex." I watched as he squirmed under my gaze, his charm dissolving into a clumsy attempt at damage control. He reached for my hand, but I recoiled as if he had burned me. "Just hear me out." I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I was scared. "Scared?" I shot back, incredulous. "You were scared of what? Commitment? Honesty? Because if being in a relationship scared you, you should have had the decency to talk to me about it instead of running off into someone else's arms." The surrounding patrons began to look over, glancing at our escalating confrontation. I relished the moment, the spotlight shining on us, and I leaned into it. "Did she make you feel like a man, Alex? Did she make you feel wanted? Because I bet she didn't have the faintest idea that you were still with me." His expression transformed from panic to defensiveness. "You don't know her. You're making this about her when it's about us." That was the moment I snapped. "It's about you, Alex. It's always been about you." I leaned back, crossing my arms defiantly. "But this isn't just about our relationship anymore. I'm not just some girl you can play with, I'm done being your emotional punching bag." The realization that he'd lost control began to set in. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that I had turned the tables on him, that I was no longer that heartbroken girl who'd cried herself to sleep, hoping he'd change. "You think you can just walk away from this?" I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You think you can just pretend this never happened? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." As his eyes widened in shock and fear, I felt a rush of exhilaration. The thought of exposing him, of revealing the truth to anyone who would listen, filled me with a sense of power I hadn't anticipated. Wouldn't it be poetic to bring him to his knees, to lay bare every lie he fed me? "Please, don't," he stammered, desperation seeping into his voice. "I'll do anything. Just don't tell anyone." The irony wasn't lost on me. He was pleading for mercy after the chaos he'd unleashed in my life. "That's the thing, Alex. You can't ask for mercy when you've shown none. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to reclaim my life and expose your truth. You took advantage of my trust, and now it's your turn to face the consequences." I leaned in closer, locking eyes with him, savoring the raw emotion that flickered across his face: confusion, guilt, fear. It was a heady mix, intoxicating in a way I had never experienced before. Suddenly, I felt liberated, like I had shed the weight of his betrayal, leaving behind my old self who allowed love to blind her to reality. In that instant, I knew that my revenge didn't just mean telling a few friends or posting on social media. No, I wanted to ensure this lesson lingered with him. I wanted him to feel the humiliation that had wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. He needed to know that actions had consequences, and I was ready to be the one to make him pay for the trauma he inflicted on me. How does it feel to know that someone out there is waiting to expose you? To see you squirm? To know that the woman you thought was just a fling could very well turn the world against you? I challenged, enjoying the way he recoiled as my words dug deeper. He shook his head, desperate, like a cornered animal. You're being cruel. I didn't want to hurt you. His voice was shaky, a faint echo of the man I once loved. Cruel? I laughed again, this time without any hint of amusement. Cruel is betraying someone who loved you unconditionally. Cruel is letting your selfish desires dictate your actions without a second thought for how it impacts the people in your life. I'm merely giving you a taste of your own medicine. The cafe was buzzing around us, patrons now fully engrossed in our confrontation. I could feel the intensity of their stares, the whispers and side glances that wrapped around us like a cocoon. In that moment, I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was reclaiming my identity, reminding myself that I was worth more than the hurt he had tried to inflict. I'm going to tell your friends, I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. I'll let them know how you've been playing them, how you've been lying about your relationships, keeping secrets like a child hiding their candy. I'll make sure your reputation is forever tainted, and there's nothing you can do about it. The look of horror etched on his face was worth every moment of pain I had endured. It was the turning point I had been waiting for, the moment I realized that the power belonged to me now. I'm not afraid of what you'll do, he blurted out, trying to regain some semblance of control, but I could see the cracks in his bravado. You wouldn't really hurt me like that. I smirked, leaning back, letting the silence linger. Oh, but I will, Alex. You don't know me anymore. You only think you do. And as I sat there, watching the reality of what he had done settle over him in waves, I felt a surge of triumph. There was no going back now. The narrative had shifted. What was once a story of betrayal had transformed into one of empowerment. I stood up, ready to leave him squirming in that cafe, surrounded by onlookers who'd just witnessed a broken relationship unravel in real time. Enjoy the rest of your day, Alex, I said, turning to walk with each step away from the cafe. The adrenaline coursed through me, fueled by a mix of triumph and determination. The confrontation was just the beginning. My revenge plan began to take shape in the back of my mind, each detail carefully orchestrated to ensure Alex realized the full weight of his choices. First and foremost, I needed to collect evidence, solid proof of his deceit. I texted the anonymous tipster who had initially reached out to me. Thank you for telling me about Alex. Can you share more details? I need to know everything. It didn't take long for them to respond, dropping cryptic hints about other girls he'd been seeing, including one who was definitely serious and seemed to know about me. This was just what I needed. If I could gather more names and stories, I could build a case that would leave him exposed for everyone he cared about. Next, I reached out to my own circle of friends. I made a group chat where I could share everything. I carefully crafted my words. Hey everyone, I need to talk. Alex and I recently broke up under shocking circumstances, and it's important that you know the truth. I would love your support. I scheduled a gathering where I could tell them the story in person. I knew that by revealing his betrayal to my friends, I could create an echo of my story that would eventually reach all the people in his life. The goal was to ensure they saw him for who he really was, deceptive and unworthy of trust. For the grand finale, I knew social media would be my stage. I created an anonymous account on a platform where he was quite active, using a name he wouldn't recognize. One night, I meticulously composed a post that would send shockwaves through his friends. Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested. After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you, this guy is playing a dangerous game. I included screenshots of our conversations, the text from my anonymous tipster, and even snippets of messages showing his flirtation with other women. It was a calculated move, but I felt confident that the truth needed to be known, and I would make sure it spread like wildfire. As the days passed, I could almost feel the tension mounting around us. I had set everything in motion, and it was a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I knew the fallout would be monumental. I stashed away my phone in a drawer and chose to engage in self-care, focusing on myself, my health, my hobbies, and my friends. I had to remind myself that this plan was about reclaiming my power and not getting lost in the chaos. The day finally arrived when I was prepared to unleash my plan. I woke up early, giddy with anticipation. I donned my favorite outfit, the one I knew made me feel confident and fierce. The time had come to confront Alex once more, but this time, it would be on my terms. I arranged to meet him at the same cafe, but instead of sitting across from him, I planned to stand at a distance, watching him squirm as he interacted with friends and acquaintances. I wanted to see the moment the post went live, the moment he'd realize everything was crashing down around him. As I entered the cafe, the familiar scent of roasted coffee and pastries wafted through the air, but it felt tainted now, a reminder of the good times that had been irrevocably lost. I spotted him at a corner table, surrounded by a group of mutual friends, laughing and sipping on his usual caramel macchiato. He looked effortlessly charming, yet it struck me how truly superficial that charm was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to unfold. My heart raced as I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I opened the anonymous account and hit post. A surge of exhilaration washed over me as I pressed the button, watching the words fly into the digital ether. The caption read, "Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested." After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you, this guy is playing a dangerous game. As the notification flashed across the screen, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was like standing on the precipice of a roller coaster, waiting for the drop. I quickly tucked my phone away, but the anticipation was electric. Within moments, my instincts proved right. The post started to gain traction, likes, shares, and comments flooding in. I watched as Alex's laughter faltered, his face flashing confusion as he glanced at his phone. I could see the moment his smile faded, replaced by panic as he scrolled through the comments. Friends leaned in closer, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. "What the hell is this?" I heard him mutter, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, I felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and excitement at the chaos I had unleashed. I watched as his fingers flew over his screen, trying to respond, to dial me, but it was too late. Each passing second felt like an infinite cascade of poetic justice. "Alex, what's wrong?" one of his friends asked, concern etched across her face. "That's not true," he snapped, his voice rising, drawing even more attention. "It's just some bullshit rumor." But I could see the cracks in his facade, deepening, the way his eyes darted around the cafe, searching for allies, for someone to defend him. I reveled in the realization that he was utterly alone, surrounded by friends who were now questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The cafe began to fill with whispers, the air thick with disbelief and judgment. I overheard snippets of conversation around me, people speculating about his character, about the girl he cheated on me with, and the devastating implications of his betrayal. The power I felt was palpable. Alex was being publicly dismantled before everyone's eyes. "Who is she?" another friend asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "Is this true?" "I don't know who it is. It's a lie," he shouted, his desperation growing more apparent. But beneath his panicked attempts to dismiss the truth, I could see the cracks of his confidence widening. I dared a glance at his face, and it was ghostly pale, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. My heart raced with satisfaction. This was the poetic justice I envisioned. Unable to contain myself any longer, I walked closer, feigning nonchalance. But inside, I was a storm. "Hey Alex," I said, my voice cool and steady, slicing through the tension like a knife. The aftermath of that day was a whirlwind of emotions that left me feeling both exhilarated and deeply reflective. I had orchestrated the perfect storm, unveiling the facade Alex had maintained for far too long. The repercussions of my actions rippled through both our lives in ways I hadn't anticipated. As the days turned into weeks, I watched the fallout unfold. Alex's social media accounts were flooded with comments, friends expressing disbelief, others demanding answers. I knew the truth would eventually settle within his circle, but I wasn't prepared for how it would echo throughout our entire community. Word spread fast. Mutual acquaintances approached me with pity in their eyes and disbelief in their voices. "Is it true?" they would ask, their tone heavy with concern. I realized that the wound I had inflicted on Alex was not just physical, it was a public humiliation that would follow him, haunting every interaction he had for months to come. I braced myself for the whispers, the questions swirling around me. Did he really do that? Can you believe it? I even received messages from others who had been in similar situations, thanking me for speaking out. They felt emboldened by my confrontation, empowered to share their own stories of betrayal. I was inadvertently leading a movement of sorts, one that demanded accountability from those who played with hearts and trust. Meanwhile, Alex struggled to regain some semblance of control in his life. I'd see him occasionally, often attempting to maintain a brave face, but the shadows under his eyes told another story. The confidence he once radiated had vanished, replaced by an unease that made him seem foreign to me. Gone was the charming boy who swept me off my feet. In his place stood a man hollowed out by the consequences of his actions. Yet, amidst the triumph of my revenge, I grappled with conflicting emotions. Each time I watched Alex try to laugh off the rumors or explain himself to bewildered friends, the initial thrill of vengeance ebbed away, replaced by a pang of guilt. I had wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal, but did he truly deserve this endless cycle of shame? I found myself reflecting on my own humanity. Did I want to be the person who reveled in someone else's destruction? Was my thirst for revenge worth the toll it took on my conscience? As I navigated these uncomfortable thoughts, I began to understand that vengeance is not a simple concept, it's riddled with complexity and nuance. In the midst of this turmoil, I turned inward, using my experience as a catalyst for personal growth. I sought therapy, determined to unpack the layers of my heartbreak and the anger that had driven my revenge. My therapist encouraged me to view my experience as a journey of self-discovery rather than just a chapter marred by betrayal. I found strength in vulnerability, learning to embrace my emotions, anger, sadness, and ultimately, forgiveness. The process was arduous, but with each session, I chipped away at the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. Slowly, I began to forge a new identity, one not defined by Alex's betrayal but by my resilience in the face of it. Weeks later, after the dust had settled, I encountered Alex again at a mutual friends gathering. The air was thick with tension as our eyes met across the room. I could see the hesitation in his gaze, a mixture of remorse and defiance. As I approached him, my heart raced, but this time, it was for a different reason.
You know that feeling when your gut twists in knots, and you can almost taste the bitterness lingering in your mouth? That's what it felt like every time I walked past my kitchen window, taking in the quiet suburb where I'd once felt safe. A neighborhood that had turned into the backdrop of the most painful chapter of my life. The sun would dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that fell like a shroud over my home, and with it came the memories, the sweet, syrupy ones that turned sour the moment I remembered the betrayal that had shattered it all. My name is Ella, and I've lived in this quaint little house for 5 years. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave as they walk their golden retrievers, and children ride bicycles giggling down the street. But what once felt like a sanctuary became a cage filled with echoes of laughter that no longer belonged to me. The key players in this story? Let's start with my husband, Mark. At first glance, he was everything I ever wanted, charming, ambitious, and with a smile that could light up the darkest room. But as I've learned, sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And then there was Lily, his best friend. She was the type of woman who could walk into a room and instantly draw everyone's attention. Her laughter was infectious, her beauty mesmerizing. I had once admired her, but now, she was the specter that haunted my dreams. It started innocently enough, the kind of mundane lies that slip through the cracks of a relationship. Late nights at work, casual mentions of meetings that never took place. But I was too blinded by love, or perhaps, too naive, to see the fissures growing beneath the surface. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a message on Mark's phone, a simple "can't wait to see you tonight," that the walls of my world began to tremble. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine, the kind that makes you want to turn away but keeps you locked in place, helpless and horrified. As I read those words, I felt them pierce me deeper than any knife ever could. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, drowning out the distant sounds of laughter from the street outside, sounds that felt like a cruel joke at my expense. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I could almost hear the whispers of my own despair mingling with the scent of betrayal that lingered in the air. The emotional turmoil churned in my stomach, rising like bile, and I realized then that I was no longer the victim in this twisted play of love and treachery. No, the time had come for me to serve a cold dish of revenge, one that would not only settle the score but perhaps lay waste to the very foundations of the lives they had built on lies. Something ominous loomed ahead, and I could feel it wrapping around me like a tight embrace, whispering that the storm was just beginning. And as I wrestled with the choices I had to make, a deep, simmering anticipation grew within me, turning that bitterness into something darker, something that demanded satisfaction. I was ready to reclaim my life, and they would not see it coming. The days that followed were a blur, each one stretching and contracting in a dance of disbelief and anger. My heart raced at the slightest thought of what I had discovered, the very air around me felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. For a while, I clung to the hope that I was misreading things, that Mark wouldn't dare betray me, yet, deep down, I knew the truth. It gnawed at me, pulling me under like a relentless tide. I wanted to confront him, to shake the truth out of him like a dog with a bone, but every time I opened my mouth, the words evaporated. Instead, I found myself slipping into a routine that felt foreign, a facade of normalcy that saw me laughing and smiling as if everything were all right. But inside, the turmoil was festering, growing like a cancer that threatened to overtake me. Every evening, I masked my fury while cooking dinner, the aromas wafting through my kitchen like some sickly sweet veneer over the bitterness eating away at my soul. Meanwhile, my mind would drift, twisting and turning through the memories of our life together. I could almost hear the echoes of us, laughing on the couch, sharing dreams under the stars, the promises that felt unbreakable. Each memory now felt like a knife, sharp and merciless, slicing through the fabric of my trust. Then came the day I crossed that line. It was a rainy Tuesday, with clouds heavy enough to burst at any moment. Mark was late coming home from work again, and I decided to take a drive to clear my head. As I pulled up to Lily's house, I thought of how often she had been in ours, laughing over dinner and sharing glasses of wine. I remember thinking she was family, someone I could rely on. The irony stung like a fresh wound. What I saw through the window of her living room turned my insides to ice. Mark, laughing, his face alive in a way I hadn't seen in months, and Lily, her fingers dancing along his arm like they were orchestrating a symphony of betrayal. It was an image seared into my mind, a grotesque painting of everything I held dear, splattered with treachery. In that moment, all the air was sucked from my lungs, and I felt swallowed by an overwhelming wave of grief and rage. I could feel the tears pooling in my eyes, blurring my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I embraced the anger, let it wash over me like a cleansing flame. How could he? I thought, each repetition of the phrase like a pulse in my temples. How could she? The betrayal wasn't just from him, it was from the woman I had considered a friend. They had built a world so seamless, so intricate, that it made my heart ache with a pain I had never known. As I drove home, the rain poured down, mirroring the chaos inside me. I stewed in my thoughts, retracing my steps, trying to piece together the moments that led up to this. The late nights that turned into excuses, the missed calls and secretive glances. I grappled with disbelief, anger, and that sinking sadness that comes from feeling utterly alone. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a seed of resolve began to sprout within me. The thought of confronting them felt like a trap, one where I would only serve as the pitiful victim. No, I would not let them see me cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing the full extent of the pain they had caused. Each moment I considered my next move, a new wave of humiliation crashed over me, forcing me deeper into isolation. The days turned into weeks, and my emotional state spiraled. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces I once filled with joy. Friends began to notice my absence. Invitations to gatherings trickled away, and the phone calls diminished. How could they understand the monstrous betrayal that was suffocating me? I felt like an imposter, masking my grief under a veneer of politeness, and the more I faked my joy, the more I isolated myself from everyone I cared about. One afternoon, I ran into my neighbor, Claire. She was sipping coffee on her porch, her golden retriever snoozing at her feet. She waved me over, concern etching her brow when I sat down. "Ella, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" The question floated in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream the truth but instead found myself nodding and muttering something about work stress. I could see the doubt flicker in her eyes, the urge to dig deeper. But I couldn't bear the idea of unearthing my pain so publicly. I forced a smile, but it felt like a mask slipping further down my face. And so, I continued to wear my disguise, but I could feel the weight of secrecy pressing down on me. One night, I decided to confront Mark about my suspicions, believing that maybe I could regain some semblance of my old life by demanding the truth. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling as I sat across from him at the dinner table, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "I found a message on your phone." I watched the way his expression shifted, the flicker of fear in his eyes. For a moment, I thought I might see guilt wash over him, but he quickly masked it with irritation. "It's nothing, Ella. Why can't you just trust me?" he snapped, his tone harsh and dismissive. I felt my heart sink. The arrogance in his voice made me feel small, belittled for my pain. Instead of owning up, he twisted the narrative, making me feel like the offender. I was left grappling with the revelation that he had turned my love into a weapon against me. "Do you really expect me to trust you after everything?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. In that moment, I was no longer Ella, I was a stranger confronting the man I thought I knew. We argued for hours, and by the time we were done, I was left with a hollow silence and a raging storm of disbelief. Yet, the isolation seeped in, Mark's outrage had turned into contempt, and I felt utterly alone. No one could rescue me from his anger. It was another layer of betrayal that I hadn't anticipated. As days turned into dark nights, I stumbled upon more clues that drove the nail of despair even deeper. It was a Saturday when I discovered the last nail in the coffin, an offhand comment from one of Mark's colleagues at a barbecue I reluctantly attended. "Enjoying your new place with Lily?" he said, a playful grin plastered across his face. I froze. The laughter that followed felt like shards of glass cutting through my heart. I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as humiliation flooded my senses. The world around me dulled, and I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the cheers and clinks of beer bottles. Suddenly, everyone was staring. I drove home that evening, the engine's growl drowning out the storm raging within me. Each bump in the road felt like the universe mocking my anguish as I replayed the words in my mind. "Enjoying your new place with Lily." It was as if I had been handed a blade, sharp and glinting, ready to cut my heart out and leave it for the crows. The anger simmered beneath my skin, igniting a fire I hadn't realized was there. Sitting in my driveway, I stared at the familiar side of my home, the sanctuary that had, unbeknownst to me, turned into a battleground. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles whitening as the reality of my situation slammed into me like a tidal wave. I was not merely a bystander in my own life, I was the fool. The final straw had been laid bare, stark and unbearable. Mark and Lily had twisted the knife deep enough to sever the bonds of our relationship, and as I sat there, that realization morphed into something potent, a mixture of rage and clarity. I had spent weeks wallowing in despair, hoping for something that no longer existed. A flicker of courage ignited within me. It was a whisper that told me I didn't have to be a victim anymore. As I stepped into the house, the air felt charged, thick with betrayal. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could do. I had always been the calm one, the one who believed in understanding and forgiveness. But now I was on the brink of embracing my darker side, the side that yearned for justice, however twisted it might be. I felt untethered, like a marionette with its strings cut, free to enact a plan that had been simmering beneath the surface. Ideas began to flood my mind, chaotic yet strangely comforting. My heart raced as I visualized the steps I could take, how I could orchestrate my revenge without them seeing it coming. What would be the perfect retribution for a betrayal of this magnitude? I replayed the moments of their laughter, their intimacy, and with every mental image, my resolve hardened. I thought of the weekends I spent organizing surprise parties for Mark, the countless hours I spent planning dinners for friends, a life I had built for them both. I had infused love into every corner of our home, every shared experience, every plan for the future. And now, it felt like every ounce of that love was a weapon I could wield against them. My fingers brushed the counter in the kitchen, where we had shared countless meals, where laughter had once filled the silence. I imagined it all collapsing, turning their joy into chaos, shattering the very foundation of the lives they had constructed on my heartbreak. But this wouldn't be mindless destruction. I wanted them to feel every ounce of despair that I felt. I wanted them to understand that betrayal comes at a cost, and I was more than willing to extract that price. My mind raced with ideas, the first tendrils of a meticulous plan weaving themselves together. The turning point wasn't just my discovery of their betrayal, nor was it the anger that boiled over after that barbecue. No, it was the moment when I realized I could take back my power. I could no longer be the passive participant in this tragic play. As I stood alone in my kitchen, the bittersweet taste of vengeance mingled with the remnants of my love, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. My heart was a storm, fierce and relentless, but it was a storm I would channel. I would know. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead settle over my shoulders like an old, familiar cloak. I was ready to meticulously craft my revenge, a dish served cold and with a side of poetic justice. I opened my laptop and began to outline my plan step by step, letting the adrenaline fuel my creativity. The first phase of my plan was all about information. I needed to know everything about their schedules, their routines, and who they confided in. That meant becoming the invisible observer in their lives. I knew Mark's phone was my best resource. I couldn't hack it, but I was adept at understanding his habits. So, I began with the basics, tracking his whereabouts on social media. I created a fake account on Instagram and started following Mark's friends, particularly those who routinely shared updates about their lives. I figured out their game nights, gym schedules, and everything else I needed to know to weave my way into their social fabric seamlessly. I reached out to Claire, my neighbor who had never suspected anything was amiss. I shared a fabricated story about needing help organizing a surprise birthday party for Mark. I framed it as an act of goodwill to help repair my relationship with him. Claire, being the sweet, unsuspecting soul she was eager to help and agreed to join forces. In her eagerness, she even suggested inviting Lily, thinking it would be a great way to mend fences among friends. I suppressed a smile at the irony, knowing this was going to be a crucial part of my plan. With Claire's help, I could draw them into a situation that would ultimately serve my purpose. I set the date for the party, and with Claire's assistance, I meticulously planned every detail. I chose a local venue that was beautiful yet intimate and emotional. Setting where whispers could float and laughter could mask deeper truths. The invites went out, and as guests began to accept, I felt a sense of control returning to my life. What I needed now was the perfect distraction for Mark and Lily. So, I crafted a series of side events, games that required teamwork, allowing them to rely on one another and further deepen the bond they had so callously torn from me. I could almost hear the whispers of betrayal echoing in the back of my mind, and each step closer to the big day felt like an electric charge pulsing through me. The pièce de résistance would be the cake, a stunning, multi-layered confection that would serve as a metaphor for my revenge. With my culinary skills honed over the years, I decided to bake the cake myself using a mix of flavors Mark loved. But the twist. Inside the cake, I would hide a small, tasteful message written on edible paper. As they cut the cake, it would reveal the truth about me discovering their affair, something that would catch them totally off guard. The message would read, "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The night of the party arrived, and as I stood in the venue surrounded by friends and acquaintances, I could feel the simmer of excitement and anxiety in my stomach. Mark was oblivious, enjoying the attention like the narcissist he was, while Lily basked in the glow of her deception, unaware of the trap that was closing in around her. As the night unfolded, I orchestrated moments. The evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Laughter echoed in the venue, mingling with the sweet scent of cake and the soft hum of chatter. It was a celebration, one that I had meticulously crafted, and yet, it felt like the calm before the storm. Mark beamed under the dim lights, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lily, radiant as ever, flitted around the room like a butterfly, her laughter spilling like warm honey over the crowd. It sickened me. Every smile, every flirtatious quip they exchanged felt like daggers aimed at my heart. The cake stood at the center of the room, a glorious masterpiece draped in delicate icing. It was beautiful, and yet, I could feel the energy swirling around it, heavy, electric, pregnant with anticipation. I watched as the moments ticked by, my heart thumping in rhythm with the beat of my resentment. Finally, I clapped my hands, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, everyone. It's time for the big moment," I announced, my voice steady, though inside, I was trembling with a rush of adrenaline. Mark turned to me, his eyes alight with genuine excitement. "What do you have for me?" he asked, a childlike eagerness etched across his face. How could he be so blissfully ignorant? I gestured toward the cake, and cheers erupted from the crowd. Everyone gathered around, forming a semicircle as I moved to the side, a silent conductor guiding the symphony of my revenge. "Make a wish." I urged him, my eyes fixed on Lily, who stood to the side, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. There was something deliciously satisfying in watching her smile falter for just a second. Mark closed his eyes, and as he blew out the candles, I felt the tension knot tighter in my chest. He leaned forward, grasping the knife, and I held my breath, waiting for the moment the truth would slice through his delusion like a hot knife through butter. He cut into the cake, and a hush fell over the room. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath. As the first piece came free, the hidden note nestled within began to surface. My heart raced. I could see Mark's smile falter, confusion knitting his brows as the words gradually came into view. "What's this?" he asked, holding the piece in midair, the laughter from earlier dissipating into an uneasy silence. I watched as the crowd leaned in, curiosity etched into their expressions. The room felt electric, every face turned toward the revelation unfolding before them. In that moment, the edginess of the situation caught up with me. I felt exhilarated and terrified all at once, riding the razor's edge of vindication. Mark unfolded the note, his gaze darting between the paper and my face. "Ella. What is this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The room waited with bated breath, witnessing the unraveling of everything they believed to be true. "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with betrayal. Gasps echoed around the gathering as realization dawned on the others, their eyes shifting from Mark to Lily. I watched as her face drained of color, the facade slipping away like a mask discarded. Mark looked up from the note, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. What? How did the silence that followed my revelation was deafening? In that moment, the room transformed into a stage of disbelief and betrayal, as each guest processed the sharp words that shattered the illusion Mark had built. I could see the weight of the situation settling on their shoulders, the fun and laughter replaced by a creeping unease. Mark's face morphed from confusion to anger in the blink of an eye. He looked at me, eyes blazing with fury, but it was the betrayal he felt, the realization that I had been one step ahead all along, that painted his expression with shades of panic. "You did this." His voice was an echo of the man I once loved, but now it felt foreign and cold, a remnant of the relationship that had died the moment he let Lily into our lives. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant memory, and in its place was the weight of truth, the kind that can only reveal itself through moments of stark clarity. Claire, who had been standing beside me, gasped, her eyes darting from Mark to me, then back again. "Ella, is this true? Did you know?" Her confusion was palpable. She had been my ally in this treacherous game, and her loyalty hung in the balance. "I knew," I responded, my voice steady even as my heart raced. I felt liberated, the shackles of shame and hurt falling away like dead leaves. And I wanted him to know that I'm not the fool he thought I was. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, whispers spiraling through the crowd like a wildfire. The reality of the affair was settling in, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with condemnation, and I realized then that I had become a pariah in my own social circle. Yet, amid that realization, there was an undeniable sense of power coursing through me. Lily's facade crumbled as she grappled with the fallout, her confident demeanor replaced by panic. She tried to laugh it off, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "It's not what you think, Ella. We were just what?" I interrupted, relishing the power that came from peeling back the layers of her lies. "Living in the shadows of my trust? Is that how you view our friendship? As an opportunity for betrayal?" Mark shot her a look of disbelief, and I could see the betrayal etched across his face. "You told me it was nothing," he spat, venom dripping from his words. The disgust in his voice was tangible, and I felt a twisted satisfaction at the unraveling of their bond. As the scene unfolded, I watched the room fracture. Friends who had once rallied around the couple looked on, some already shuffling away from the calamity that had erupted. The whispers grew louder, and the air thickened with tension as the reality set in. This betrayal wasn't just my story, it was theirs too. I stepped back, allowing the chaos to swell around me like a tempest. I felt a pang of guilt for the lives I was upending, Claire's confusion, the awkward glances from acquaintances I once called friends. But that guilt was eclipsed by the satisfaction of having regained control over my narrative. In the days that followed, the fallout continued like ripples in a pond. Mark and Lily were ostracized, their tight-knit circle unraveling in whispers of betrayal. The same friends who had once laughed with them now distanced themselves, finds themselves caught in the web of deceit they had spun. Invitations to gatherings dried up.
You know that feeling when the world just flips upside down, and everything you thought you knew dissolves into a fog of betrayal? That was me, standing in the middle of the campus quad on a crisp October afternoon, the leaves swirling around my feet like a chaotic whirlpool of all the emotions I was struggling to process. The sun was bright, casting long shadows across the brick paths, but all I could see was the silhouette of him, Ryan, laughter spilling from his lips as he surrounded himself with his new friends, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. I can still feel the weight of the betrayal sinking into my chest, a thick, suffocating fog that wrapped around my heart. Just a few weeks prior, I had been his world. We shared everything. Late-night study sessions in cramped dorm rooms, coffee breaks between classes filled with dreams and plans. I was the girl he told his friends about, the one he promised he would never hurt. But promises are fragile, and trust, well, it can shatter in an instant. It started innocently enough. I had noticed the little things, the way he seemed distracted, the way his laughter didn't reach his eyes anymore. I brushed them off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. But then the texts came, too frequent and too intimate, and in one suffocating moment, my heart shattered when I discovered he'd been with someone else, right under my nose. Her name was Sarah, another student in our sociology class, someone who looked exactly like the girls I had always felt insecure about. I was furious, heartbroken, and most importantly, filled with a desperate need for retribution. The moment I saw them together, standing too close, whispering in a way that felt intimate, something dark coiled within me. I could feel the rage boiling, simmering under the surface, waiting for any excuse to bubble up. I should have walked away, confronted him, or even just cried it out with friends over a tub of ice cream. But deep down, I knew I needed something else, a plan. I wanted him to feel the fear that I felt, to understand just how it felt to be hunted and haunted by what he had done. And so, as I watched him laugh, clueless and carefree, the gears started turning in my mind. What if I made him think he was being watched? What if I became the ghost in his life, the shadow that lingered just out of sight? I wanted to see the worry in his eyes, the confusion. I wanted him to realize that his actions had consequences. It was a twisted, dark idea, but one that consumed me entirely, pushing me deeper into a world of his own making. Little did he know, I was about to become the phantom of his nightmares. The thrill of the unknown, that intoxicating rush of revenge, began to seep into my veins. I was no longer just the heartbroken girl, I was the architect of his fear. And as I turned to leave the quad, blending into the crowd of students who were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. I spent the next few days lurking in the shadows, carefully plotting my every move. Each moment was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety, as my heart raced with the thrill of the game I was about to play. I watched him from a distance, noting his routines, who he hung out with, and the places he frequented. It felt a little like a scene from a movie, where the villain is carefully orchestrating their grand plan, all while maintaining an innocent facade. Only, in this case, I was both the villain and the victim, the lines of right and wrong blurred in the haze of my anger. One day, as I followed him from class to the library, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I really going through with this? Did I really want to sink to this level? But the memory of his laughter with her, the way he looked at me with that cold indifference, was enough to push me forward. I had to remind him of what he lost, to resurrect the ghost of our relationship that he had so carelessly discarded. I waited until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with colors that mirrored my tumultuous emotions. The campus transformed under the evening lights, shadows creeping out from alleyways and corners, making it the perfect backdrop for my revenge. I donned dark clothing, blending into the night like a vengeful spirit. This was my moment to strike. The first night involved simple distractions, moving his backpack a few feet from where he left it, placing an ominous note written in hastily scrawled letters on a bench he frequently sat on. "You're not alone." It was vague enough to keep him guessing, but pointed enough to spark unease. I watched from a distance, my heart hammering as I observed Ryan's confusion turn to anxiety as he found the note. The way his brow furrowed and his eyes darted around was intoxicating. I felt a twisted sense of power surge through me as he looked around, as if searching for an answer in the dark, just like I had been searching for answers after discovering his betrayal. For days, I escalated my tactics. I left more notes, sketchy reminders of my presence. I would hide in nearby bushes, watching as he jumped every time a gust of wind rustled the leaves. I'd occasionally bump into him, acting like a bystander, forcing a smile while I reveled in his discomfort. Even the smallest twitch in his demeanor felt like a victory to me. But it wasn't just fun and games, it was also deeply unsettling. The line between reality and my revenge had become fuzzy. I replayed every moment of our relationship in my mind, scrutinizing every sweet memory while reminding myself of the betrayal. The emotional push and pull was exhausting. I would lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my conscience. Was I becoming the monster he had made of me? As the weeks wore on, the thrill of my plan began to fade into something darker. I could see the toll this was taking on him. His carefree laughter had been replaced with a nervous, furrowed brow, and it struck me that I had turned him into a shadow of the person I once loved. I found myself questioning my own motives. Was this revenge or merely an act of desperation to regain some semblance of control in my life after he had shattered my heart? One evening, as I watched him from a distance, I caught sight of him with his new friends, the same ones he had laughed with so easily when all was right in his world. Now, they were scanning the area with worried expressions, whispering among themselves about the strange occurrences surrounding Ryan. A chill swept through me as I observed the anxiety etched on their faces. It was a moment of clarity, one that struck like a bolt of lightning. I was no longer merely playing a game of revenge, I was responsible for instilling fear, a feeling I had so desperately fought against when I discovered his betrayal. In my twisted sense of justice, I had relinquished my own humanity. The thrill of seeing Ryan jump at shadows and glance nervously over his shoulder began to feel like a poison coursing through my veins, tainting the satisfaction I once sought. There I was, cloaked in darkness, but instead of feeling powerful, I felt hollow, the joy of my revenge fading like the dying light of the day. The humiliation hit hard when I overheard one of Ryan's friends mention how worried they were about him. "He doesn't even want to be alone anymore," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. Suddenly, I felt sick. I had successfully turned him into a prisoner of his own mind, a shell of the guy I used to know, and it gnawed at me. I wanted him to feel the pain of betrayal, yes, but I never wanted to ruin his life. That night, as I lay in my darkened room, the shadows felt different, heavier. They were no longer filled with the electric thrill of my plan but weighed down by the guilt and doubt I was now grappling with. I tossed and turned, my mind repeating the mantra, "This isn't who I am." I could hear the echoes of my friends' laughter, feel their warmth, and I suddenly longed for that connection again. Instead, I was isolating myself, pushing everyone away while I dwelled in this dark space of retaliation. The following day, I decided to change my tactics. I hoped maybe I could find some balance, alleviate the torment I was inflicting. I left a note for him, one that felt like a glimpse of my fractured self: "You don't have to be afraid." It was cryptic, yes, but meant to convey that I was done playing games. I didn't want to terrorize him, I just wanted him to understand the weight of what he had done. But when I saw him receive the note, trembling hands, eyes wide with confusion and fear, I realized I had underestimated his response. As he read the words, he looked around, searching for answers, relief spilling over into the worried expressions of his friends who had begun to gather around him. They whispered, glancing at me, and for the first time, I felt myself being pulled back into the shadow of my own creation, a mere spectator to the chaos I had unleashed. As the days passed, I noticed something darker brewing inside me. The lines I had tried to navigate became grotesquely blurred. I suffered from sleepless nights, riddled with guilt, yet I continued my charade. I couldn't bring myself to face Ryan directly, terrified he'd see the truth in my eyes, the anguish behind the mask I wore. Instead, I slipped further into my role as his specter, haunting him with a chilling presence that kept him unsettled. Then came a moment that would shatter the fragile composure I had clung to. I overheard Ryan talking to Sarah, his voice strained. "I can't take this anymore. I feel like I'm being hunted," he said, his voice breaking, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't anticipated. My heart sank, a deep ache seeping into my chest. I had become the very thing I had loathed. It was humiliating to realize that the very pleasure I had drawn from the fear I instilled in him had transformed into a sickening weight inside me. I stood against the wall, hidden in the shadows of a nearby building, my heart racing as I listened to him pour out his soul to Sarah, who seemed as perplexed as I felt. She was trying to comfort him, but all I could think was, "What have I done? I was just trying to get back at you," I whispered under my breath, as if that could somehow absolve me of the darkness consuming my actions. It felt surreal, listening to my ex-boyfriend, the one I had loved so deeply, voice his turmoil, yet here I was, the source of that turmoil, his phantom, his unseen tormentor. As I leaned against the rough brick wall, the chill of the evening air slipped under my skin, amplifying my sense of unease. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in that moment of betrayal, the piercing realization of his unfaithfulness flooding back with a vengeance. But instead of fueling my anger, it ignited something else, a deep, gnawing regret. I had been hurt, yes, but I had crossed an unforgivable line. I was not just a heartbroken girl anymore, I was a puppet master tugging on the strings of someone else's life, and I was losing control. Watching Ryan break down in front of Sarah, a girl I had once been jealous of, set off a chain reaction of emotions. The initial thrill of revenge was replaced by a pit in my stomach. This wasn't justice, this was cruelty. As he leaned against a tree, shoulders trembling, it hit me like a wave, the final straw had come crashing down. I was not just ruining his life, I was also dismantling my own sense of self in the process. What was I doing? Who had I become? The anger that had been my fuel now felt like poison, suffocating the remnants of my former self. I realized that I didn't want him to suffer endlessly. I wanted him to understand the pain he had caused me, to recognize the gravity of his actions, not to be trapped in a web of anxiety that I had spun. And there it was, the turning point, the moment I decided I needed to end this charade. I watched as Ryan wiped tears from his eyes, frustration bubbling up as he confronted the source of his fears, the ghost I had created. The sight of him like this was like a dagger twisting in my heart. I wanted to scream out, to tell him it was me all along, to confess that I had orchestrated this nightmare. But the fear of revealing myself and the shame of my actions paralyzed me. Staring into the abyss of his despair, I felt a profound sense of compassion transform the bitterness I clung to. I had to take responsibility for my actions, to break this cycle of revenge that had morphed into a cruel game. Instead of lurking in the shadows, it was time to emerge, to confront the mess I had made and reclaim my identity. That night, I didn't leave a note or follow him from class. Instead, I sat alone in my room, wrestling with the duality of my existence, between the heartbroken girl desperate for closure and the vengeful specter I had become. I needed to find a way to let go, to forgive him for what he had done, but more importantly, to forgive myself. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what had once brought us together, the laughter, the shared dreams, the love we had for one another. It was those memories that now felt like distant echoes, a reminder of the person I used to be before the betrayal consumed me. I needed to create a plan, but this time, it wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about closure. The revenge plan, a path toward healing one. Anonymity and revelation. I decided that if I wanted to end this cycle, I had to reveal my identity but in a way that allowed me to step back from the vengeful persona I had adopted. I would write him a heartfelt letter, sharing my feelings of betrayal and hurt, and explaining how my actions stemmed from that pain. I would leave the letter in a place he frequented, like the library desk where we used to study together, ensuring he found it unexpectedly. 2. A confrontation. After he read the letter, I planned to confront him. Not in a hostile way, but as someone who wanted to talk and find closure. I knew this wouldn't be easy, and I anticipated that he might be defensive or even angry. I wanted him to see the real consequences of his actions, but more importantly, I wanted us to discuss the hurt and betrayal we had both experienced. 3. A new beginning. I recognized that healing could only come from understanding. So, in that confrontation, I would suggest that we meet for coffee, an innocent setting where we could both express ourselves honestly. I would tell him that I was ready to move on, but first, we needed to address the chaos I had inflicted on him. 4. Genuine apology. This part would be crucial. I had to apologize for the revenge I had enacted. I needed to acknowledge that while his actions hurt me deeply, what I had done in return was unhealthy and wrong. I planned to let him know that my intent was, never to ruin his life, it was simply to make him understand that actions have consequences. I hoped this would lead to a moment of honesty, where Ryan could express his regret for cheating and we could both find some semblance of closure. 5. Setting boundaries. After our conversation, I would set clear boundaries for myself and for him. I had to make it clear that I wouldn't be lingering in his life as a haunting presence anymore. I wanted to reclaim my own happiness and encourage him to do the same, so I would suggest we take time apart, focusing on ourselves. This was about healing and moving forward, even if it meant doing so separately. 6. The final note. The last step would involve a final note where I declared my intention to step away completely from his life. I would document everything I had learned from this experience, how I had lost sight of who I was in my desire for revenge, and how I now recognized the importance of self-respect and healing. I wanted him to know that while I might not be in his life anymore, I wished him well and hoped he could grow from this experience. The obstacles ahead. But even as I mapped out this new plan, doubt lingered. Would Ryan understand my intentions? What if my confession led to anger instead of understanding? Would he even feel remorse for how he treated me or see me as just another ghost from his past? I was terrified of the vulnerability this new plan required. Sharing my true feelings meant opening myself up to the possibility of more hurt, but I knew I had to take the risk. I also had to consider his emotional state. If he was still grappling with the fear I had instilled in him, how would he react to my letter? Would he find it unsettling or enlightening? Questions swirled in my mind like the autumn leaves outside my window, drifting aimlessly without resolution. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was done with this shadowy existence. It was time to step into the light, to face the consequences of my actions with courage. The confrontation the day came. I sat in a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling around me, a contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I could see through the window as students passed by, laughter filling the air, a world I felt so distant from. With each minute that ticked by, my resolve wavered. Would he show up? Would he even want to talk to me after everything? And then, he walked through the door. The moment our eyes met, a wave of emotions flooded over me. Ryan looked different, more haggard, shadows under his eyes betraying the sleepless nights he had endured. But there was also a flicker of determination on his face. He walked over, tension crackling in the air between us. "Hey?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Hey?" I gestured to the empty seat across from me, my heart racing as he sat down. Silence enveloped us like a thick fog. We both opened our mouths to speak, only to close them again. The moment stretched, heavy with unsaid words. I could see the apprehension in his eyes, the way his fingers fidgeted with the hem of his hoodie. I knew he was still haunted, still afraid. Finally, I broke the silence, words tumbling out in a mix of urgency and fear. "I wrote you a letter." I reached into my bag and pulled it out, sliding it across the table. "I think you should read it." His brow furrowed as he picked it up, hesitating, eyes darting from the note to my face. There was a flicker of recognition, of curiosity. He opened the letter, his expression shifting as he read my words, each sentence a fragment of my heart laid bare, each confession a piece of my soul exposed. "I wanted you to understand," I continued, my voice shaky yet resolute. "When I found out about you and Sarah, I was devastated. I felt betrayed, lost. I didn't know how to cope or how to make sense of my feelings. So, I lashed out in a terrible way." He looked up, pain etched across his features, and I could see the moment the realization hit him. "That was you?" he asked, the tremor in his voice betraying a mix of fear and disbelief. I nodded. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to feel what I felt. But instead, I became the person I hated." His eyes softened, and for the first time, I could see vulnerability in him that mirrored my own. His shoulders slumped slightly, and the tension in the air began to dissipate. "I'm sorry," he said, almost too quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I messed up, and I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about you." The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of our shared pain. My breath caught in my throat, and the realization that we both had been victims of our own choices hung in the air like a thick fog. "I don't want to be angry anymore," I confessed. "I don't want this to define us. I want us both to heal." As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. The chains of anger and vengeance I had wrapped around myself for weeks began to loosen, breaking under the weight of our shared vulnerability. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Ryan, but for me as well. Ryan looked down at the table, a mix of emotions playing across his face, regret, shame, and a hint of relief. "I never meant for things to end up this way," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I messed up, and I thought losing you was the worst thing that could happen. But this, what you did, it scared me in a way I never expected. I felt like I was being hunted, and now I can see how that was your pain mirrored back at me. I deserve that fear for what I did to you." As he spoke, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen further. This was the conversation I had longed for but had never imagined would happen this way. Two broken souls, sitting across from each other, each striving for understanding amidst the carnage our actions had created. "I don't want you to feel like you're being hunted anymore," I said softly. "I know that fear. I've lived with it. But I'm here now, and I want us both to be free. Not from each other, but from this." I gestured between us, the unresolved tension and hurt that had clung to our past like a dark cloud. Ryan nodded, his expression softening as he took in my words. "I never wanted to lose you. You were my safe place, and I destroyed that. I wanted to feel something different, but I didn't realize how much I valued what we had until it was gone." His honesty struck a chord deep within me. I had wanted him to suffer, but hearing him admit his mistakes, witnessing his vulnerability, shifted something inside me. I was tired of carrying the weight of revenge. It was exhausting, and in that moment, I could see that forgiveness could be the most empowering form of closure for both of us. We talked for hours, unraveling the complex web of emotions that had ensnared us both. Conversations flowed freely as we aired our grievances, our fears, and our regrets. I learned about the pressure he faced, the overwhelming expectations at home, and the way he had sought escape in the wrong places. He learned about the darkness I had spiraled into, the loss of self amidst the chaos of betrayal. The moment felt cathartic, almost healing. As we shared our thoughts, I felt the burden of resentment begin to lift. Maybe revenge wasn't the answer, maybe it was empathy and understanding. I could see his struggle reflected in my own, and it became clear that neither of us was beyond redemption. When the sun began to set, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky, I felt a sense of finality settle over us. It was time to put the past behind us. I reached across the table, and he met my hand with a tentative touch. "Thank you for being honest with me," he said, his voice earnest. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but it means everything that you're willing to move forward." "I'm not doing this for you," I replied, my heart pounding with sincerity. "I'm doing it for myself. I want to reclaim my life, my happiness. And I hope you can do the same." In that moment, something shifted. We weren't just ex-lovers caught in a web of betrayal anymore, we were two individuals seeking closure and understanding.
Hey everyone, it's Kimberly. I've been holding onto this story for a while now, and I think it's finally time to share it. I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this, and I still can't believe how it all unfolded. Grab a snack, because this is going to get intense. I live in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of town, where everyone knows each other, at least, that's what I thought. Picture tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and the kind of friendly wave you exchange with your neighbor as you bring in your groceries. My house is a cozy little two-story with a white picket fence that I had painted myself. It's just me and my rescue dog, Max, who is the most loyal companion I could ever ask for. When it comes to my world, there are a few key players. There's Sarah, my best friend since childhood. We've been through everything together, from awkward teenage crushes to the challenges of adulting. Then there's Mr. Thompson, the elderly gentleman who lives next door. He's like a grandfather to me. And of course, there's Jake, my charming but infuriating neighbor across the street, gorgeous in a boy next door way, but often too cocky for his own good. But the person who changed everything, that would be the package thief. I never got his name, but I will never forget the way he stole my trust and everything that came with it. It all started when I discovered that several of the neighbors were missing packages from their porches. We joked about it, thinking it was just a prank or a temporary nuisance. But when I found out that my precious delivery, a brand new camera I had saved for months to buy, had been taken, that's when everything shifted. I remember standing there, staring at the empty space where my package should have been, my heart pounding with disbelief. I felt violated. I felt angry. I felt a burning need for justice that bubbled up within me, and that's where my story truly begins. As I dug deeper into the mystery of the package thief, I soon found out that getting my stuff back wouldn't be enough. I wanted him to know how it felt to be on the receiving end of betrayal, to have something precious stripped away without warning. So, buckle in, because this is the tale of how I turned my heartbreak into it wasn't just the camera that was taken, it was a piece of me, a reflection of my hard work and the joy that came with finally owning something I truly wanted. I had spent countless hours researching, saving every penny from my grocery budget, cutting back on weekend outings with Sarah, and skipping out on the latest trendy coffee shop just to afford that camera. When I finally placed the order, I had imagined the photos I would take, capturing Max's goofy expressions, the flowering trees in spring, and all the moments that made this little neighborhood feel like home. The day it was scheduled to arrive was supposed to be a milestone. I had even set aside time to unbox it with a glass of wine, feeling like I was finally stepping into a world of my own. So when I checked the tracking app that morning, my excitement turned to dread as I realized it had been marked delivered. I hurried to the porch, my heart racing, only to find that empty space mocking me. I searched everywhere, convinced I had just overlooked it. I even asked Mr. Thompson if he had seen a package lying around. But no one had. After posting about the theft in our neighborhood group chat, it became painfully clear that I wasn't the only victim. Sarah had lost a beautiful sweater she was supposed to wear for an upcoming wedding. Another neighbor had his son's birthday gift stolen, a shiny new drone. The anger started brewing. It was like a poison spreading through our little community. But the worst part was discovering that the thief didn't just come and go under the cover of night. No, he was living among us. Just days after my package was stolen, I saw him casually strolling past my house, a smug look plastered on his face as he glanced at the empty porch. It was then that I recognized him, a friend of a friend, someone I had even exchanged pleasantries with at the last neighborhood barbecue. My stomach churned at the thought, this was someone who I had trusted, someone who had shared laughs and food with neighbors like me, and yet here he was, betraying that trust with every step he took. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal twisted my insides. I felt like a fool for ever believing that we were all looking out for each other. It was as if the very foundation of my community, built on trust and familiarity, had crumbled beneath me. I began to obsess over what I would do, how I could make him feel the way I felt, exposed and vulnerable. It was more than just anger, it was a deep ache in my chest that refused to go away. I felt like I was spiraling down a rabbit hole, my thoughts consumed by visions of retribution. This guy had no idea what he had set in motion. I started gathering evidence, not in the legal sense but in a more personal and twisted way. I found myself lurking out on my porch at odd hours, hoping to spot him again. I took to social media, combing through his posts, trying to glean any information that would help me understand his life. It was like I was a detective in a movie, except the plot was getting darker by the day. I learned he had a history of petty crimes, little things that made his character more predictable, but also more infuriating. Then came the day I saw him again. This time, he was walking with a group of friends, laughing, as if the world was his playground. I watched him from my window, my heart racing with a mixture of fury and despair. He was wearing that ridiculous beanie he loved so much, and I remember thinking that it made him look even more insufferable. And that's when it hit me, the realization that he was living his life without a care while I was stuck in this whirlwind of resentment. But it didn't stop there. The sense of violation morphed into a paranoia that consumed every waking moment. I started asking myself if he would one day come back. What if he targeted my house again? Or worse, what if he decided to escalate his antics? I had always been a relatively private person, but now I was constantly peeking through the blinds, studying the street for any sign of him. Each shadow cast by the trees felt like a potential threat. Then one night it happened. I was up late, scrolling through social media, when I saw him post a photo of himself holding a brand new camera, the same kind I had lost. My heart dropped as I read the caption, "Just got this sweet rig. Can't wait to shoot some amazing pics." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My camera. My dream stolen and flaunted in front of my face like a trophy. That was the moment everything changed. I started plotting the ultimate plan. It was no longer just about getting my camera back, it was about delivering a message. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions, to understand that what he had done wasn't a mere theft, it was a betrayal of the community he pretended to be part of. I wanted him to know that I wouldn't be a passive victim any longer. I was ready to fight back. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, an idea began to blossom in my mind. I thought of all the times we had shared a laugh over some shared community event, of how we had been in close proximity, completely unaware of the dark side of his character. It would be poetic, almost fulfilling, to show him the consequences of his actions, not just in a physical way, but emotionally too. I remembered how our neighborhood had a tradition of community potlucks every month. Everyone was always encouraged to bring a dish, and it was a good way to bond, to maintain that facade of kindness. But this time, I would turn that tradition on its head. I would make it an event he would never forget. I started planning my dish, a delectable chocolate cake with a surprise ingredient. An ingredient that would definitely ruin someone's appetite: laxatives. I had done my research, it would be hard to detect and wouldn't cause any permanent damage, just an embarrassing night he would remember. It was a sickening thought, but I was filled with a rush of exhilaration. I could almost visualize his face as he took a bite and grimaced, realizing he had bitten off more than he could chew, just like I had when he stole from me. The night of the potluck arrived, and I was a whirlwind of nerves and excitement. I dressed carefully, making sure I looked the part of the friendly neighbor, ready to serve my chocolate cake like it was the pièce de résistance of the evening. I pretended everything was fine, laughing with Sarah and Mr. Thompson as they praised my baking skills. But inside, I was a storm, every laugh a reminder of the calm before the chaos I was about to unleash. When he finally arrived, I felt the energy in the room shift. He entered with that same carefree demeanor, flashing smiles at people who had no idea of his true nature. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath my surface, but I kept it in check as I casually approached him, my heart racing. I had carefully crafted my plan, and now it was time to set it in motion. With each step toward him, I felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. The potluck was buzzing with laughter and the clinking of forks, but for me, the world had narrowed down to just him. I approached casually, my smile in place, determined to keep my composure as I offered him a slice of my chocolate cake. "Hey, Jake. You have to try this. I made it special for the potluck," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside me. He flashed that infuriatingly charming smile, and for a brief moment, I felt the same foolish trust I once had. But that fleeting sentiment dissipated quickly as he took the slice from my hands, completely oblivious to what awaited him. As the evening progressed, I made sure to keep my distance while still keeping an eye on him. I chatted with other neighbors, feigning casual interest in their lives while my mind was racing with anticipation. I could see him enjoying the cake, and each laugh he let out made my heart pound. Was he suspicious? Did he suspect me? I needed to stay calm. I reminded myself that this was just a small price he had to pay for his betrayal. I had no intention of ruining his life, but I wanted him to feel a fraction of what I had felt when he took my camera. About 30 minutes in, I noticed him grabbing a drink from the table, his eyes wide as he spoke with a friend about how amazing the cake tasted. That's when I felt the first wave of satisfaction course through me. He genuinely thought he was safe, that he could waltz through our neighborhood with impunity. But I wasn't done yet. A few minutes later, I saw him pause mid-conversation, his expression shifting from jovial to confused. He placed a hand on his stomach, and I could feel a grin creeping onto my face. That was it, the moment I had been waiting for. "Everything okay, Jake?" I called out, feigning concern as I approached. "You don't look so good." I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, and I shot her a warning glance, silently pleading her to play along. I think I need to step outside for a minute," he stammered, clutching his abdomen. As he made his way toward the door, I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. Jake stumbled outside, and I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. I could already hear the murmurs of the other guests, the concerned whispers echoing through the air. "Is he okay? What happened?" But I was focused on him, my package thief, my betrayer, now on the brink of his own reckoning. As I stepped onto the porch, I caught a glimpse of him leaning against the railing, his face pale and drenched in sweat. His charming facade was cracking, and in that instant, I couldn't help but feel a wave of satisfaction mixed with a tinge of guilt. I had wanted him to feel vulnerable, and now he was. I had to remind myself, though, that this was all part of the plan, to make him understand the weight of his actions. "Jake, are you sure you're all right?" I asked, my voice dripping with faux concern. "You really seem to love that cake." He let out a groan, doubling over slightly, and I could barely contain my excitement. "I don't know what's happening. I just feel awful." He looked at me, his eyes wide and almost desperate. "Did you put something in that cake?" "Oh, come on," I said with a feigned laugh, stepping closer. "It's just a chocolate cake. I promise you, it's delicious. I wouldn't do anything to hurt you." I relished the irony in my words. Because I wasn't hurting him physically, not really, instead, I was delivering justice, and it felt intoxicating. He leaned back against the railing, clutching his stomach tighter. I could see him struggling, the realization dawning on his face that he had underestimated me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a taste of poetic justice. Suddenly, he bolted toward the front yard, and I followed closely behind, my heart racing, the thrill of the chase invigorating me. As he stumbled into the grass, he lost his balance, falling to his knees. I couldn't help but let out a small, triumphant gasp. It felt surreal, almost cinematic. A cliché moment in a movie where the villain finally gets what he deserves. Around us, more neighbors had started to notice, their heads turning in confusion and concern. The laughter and chatter from inside the potluck faded into an eerie silence as neighbors began to witness Jake's embarrassing downfall. I stood there, a mix of exhilaration and guilt coursing through my veins while I watched him writhe on the lawn, desperately trying to regain his composure. It wasn't just my heart that felt heavy in that moment, it was the weight of what I had orchestrated, the consequences of my thirst for revenge. Jake's friends rushed over, concern etched on their faces, as they helped him up and led him away from the scene. I could hear snippets of their conversation, murmurs of "what's wrong? And did he eat something off?" That made my stomach churn. Was this really worth it? I thought about my friends, my community, the very people I had wanted to protect. And yet here I was, standing on the sidelines of my own chaos. The night continued without me. I retreated into the shadows of my porch, heart racing but still unsettled. The thrill of my plan had dissipated, replaced with the stark reality of what I had done. I watched as people gathered around Jake, their expressions torn between concern and amusement. Was I the villain in this story? Had I crossed a line that should have remained untouched? The laughter had returned inside the house, but it felt hollow to me now. I was no longer part of the joyful community event. Instead, I felt like a ghost, haunting the very place I had called home. A few of the neighbors came over, eyeing me with uncertainty, perhaps starting to piece together that I was at the heart of Jake's sudden affliction. In the days that followed, the story of Jake's misadventure became the neighborhood gossip. My guilt morphed into shame as I realized how much I wanted to fade into the background. The initial thrill of revenge had paled in comparison to the reality of my actions. As I watched people tiptoe around me, their eyes filled with pity and disdain, I couldn't help but reflect on what I had sacrificed, my integrity and my place in this tight-knit community. Sarah was the first to confront me. We were sitting on my porch one afternoon, her face soft with sympathy but her words sharp. "Kim, what were you thinking? Did he really deserve that? Didn't he?" I shot back, the anger flaring up again.
Hey there, I'm Ruth. If you're watching this, I guess you're interested in revenge, perhaps you're on the brink of it yourself. But let me take you back to the moment that changed everything for me. Picture this, a small suburban town, the kind of place where secrets are buried behind white picket fences and friendly smiles. The sun was shining on a crisp autumn afternoon, and the leaves were a cascade of red and gold, but all I could see was the darkness creeping into my life. I was a junior in high school, just a regular girl trying to navigate the murky waters of adolescence. I had dreams of going to art school, sitting at my easel, and painting masterpieces that would make my mother proud. My mom is my rock, a single parent who always encouraged me to chase my dreams. She worked 2 jobs to give me everything, and I admired her resilience. But life was about to throw us a curveball that neither of us saw coming. Then there was Mia, my best friend since childhood. We shared everything, secrets, laughter, and even our fears. We were inseparable until one afternoon in late October, when the leaves crunched beneath our feet and the air was fragrant with the promise of Halloween. That day, something shifted. I watched as Mia crossed paths with Jason Collins, a guy from our school with a smile that could charm the world. He was handsome, popular, and had a reputation for being a heartbreaker. I always thought he was out of reach for someone like me. But what I didn't realize was that Mia had her sights set on him, and soon enough, she was swept away into a whirlwind romance I never saw coming. I wanted to be supportive, after all, who wouldn't want to see their best friend happy? But as the weeks passed, I could feel the distance between us growing. Phone calls turned into texts, and texts turned into silence. I was losing my best friend, and it hurt more than I could bear. On a frigid November evening, at a party I was too shy to attend, everything fell apart. When I finally gathered the courage to show up, I walked into a scene that would haunt me forever. There she was, Mia, tangled in Jason's arms, laughing like I had forgotten how to. I felt my heart shatter in that moment, as if the air was sucked from the room. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. I confronted her that night, and in a moment of anger and disbelief, I saw the real Mia, the girl who cared more about popularity than friendship. She shrugged off my hurt as if it were nothing, her eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that twisted the knife deeper. "You were just holding me back, Ruth," she said, as if those words could justify the devastation she had caused. That's when the spark of revenge ignited in my chest, a burning desire for justice. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore, it was about reclaiming my power. I started plotting a way to show Mia that I wouldn't be the footnote in her story. So here I am, on a journey that started with heartbreak but has turned into a quest for vengeance. As I share my story, I hope you'll see pieces of your own struggles and maybe even find inspiration in what I learned along the way. After all, revenge isn't always sweet, sometimes it has to be earned. And mine was just getting started. As I stood there in that suffocating living room, surrounded by laughter that felt like daggers, the confusion and disbelief twisted into a gut-wrenching pain. Mia was my sister in spirit, the person I thought I could count on, and she was throwing away our friendship for a fleeting romance with Jason. I had always feared rejection, but this wasn't just rejection, it was betrayal. The laughter echoed in my mind as I replayed the moments of our friendship, sleepovers where we shared dreams, hushed confessions beneath starry skies, and heart-to-heart talks about our futures. I had supported her when she struggled with insecurities, cheered her on through heartbreaks of her own, and now she was leaving me in the dust for someone who barely knew her. The irony stung, as if the universe was laughing along with her, mocking my loyalty. That night, when I confronted her, I didn't just see Mia, I felt the weight of every shared moment collapsing between us, like a building crumbling under the force of a wrecking ball. "You were just holding me back, Ruth," she had said, her voice dripping with indifference. I could scarcely believe what I was hearing. The words clung to me, taunting me in the quiet moments that followed. I found solace in my room, allowing the tears to stream down my cheeks as I clutched the fabric of my stuffed bear, the only relic of my childhood that had survived the storm. How could she not see the value of what we had? How could she throw me aside so easily for a guy who would likely move on to the next shiny object when the thrill wore off? As I scrolled through social media the next day, my heart pounding as I anticipated what I'd see, I found pictures of them together, beaming grins, arms wrapped around each other, Jason's charming smile contrasting so sharply with the betrayal I felt in my own heart. It was like a punch to the gut each time I saw them together, kissing under the autumn leaves, the very leaves we used to jump into as kids. I was an outsider looking in, and the dull ache of loneliness crept in like a thief in the night. But beneath that pain, something dark began to brew. I felt a surge of anger, a fire igniting deep within me. No longer would I allow Mia to dictate my worth or let her bask in the glow of her new life while I melted away in the shadows of my own heartbreak. I had been so focused on the friendship that I had neglected to love myself, and now it was time to change that. My thoughts began to race, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the betrayal was not just an emotional wound, it was a catalyst, pushing me into a new realm of understanding. I started to sketch out my plan late at night, the dim light of my desk lamp illuminating my determination. I would show Mia that this wasn't just a game to me. I would reveal the ugly side of her fairy tale, show her the consequences of her choice to trivialize our bond. What if I exposed her to the very people she was trying to impress? What if I revealed the truth about Jason? After all, he was a notorious player, and if Mia thought she had just bagged a trophy, she had another thing coming. I would dig deep, uncover his past, and unravel the image she held so dearly. Maybe then, she would understand the price of her betrayal, a price that would force her to question her values and feel the weight of her choices. As I plotted my revenge, I felt a strange exhilaration wash over me, fueling the fire burning in my chest. This was no longer just about heartbreak, it was about reclaiming my narrative, reclaiming my life. I wouldn't be the girl left behind while she waltzed off into the sunset. No, I would rise like a phoenix from the ashes of our friendship, and the world would see that I was so much more than just the girl who lost her best friend. With every passing day, the desire for revenge morphed into a resolve that felt palpable. This was my moment. I would make sure Mia understood the true cost of betrayal, and I would reclaim my story. Revenge was on the horizon, and it called to me like a siren song, promising not just justice, but a sense of empowerment I had long forgotten existed. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, the ache in my heart shifted into something darker, something more powerful. My anger transformed into a relentless machine, feeding off every moment of pain, every whispered secret shared between Mia and Jason, and every glance exchanged in the hallways of our high school. With each passing day, the reality of my situation settled deeper within me, and it was clear, I needed to act. At first, I started small. I began by subtly distancing myself from the crowd that once included Mia. I slipped into the background, observing their every move through the lens of my own anger and hurt. I watched as Mia basked in her new popularity, wearing her new relationship like a badge of honor. It gnawed at me, the way she flaunted her happiness, as if our years of friendship were nothing more than a forgotten chapter. One afternoon, while hiding behind the library stacks, I caught sight of Mia and Jason. They were huddled close, their laughter echoing off the walls like an ominous taunt. I could see her face alight with joy, and the rage within me swelled as I realized how far she had gone, all while I suffered in silence. The world around me blurred as I felt the suffocating grip of jealousy tighten its hold. In that moment, I knew I needed more than just petty revenge. I needed to unravel the very fabric of the fairy tale she was living. I wanted to expose the truth beneath the smooth surface of Jason's charm. My heart raced as I remembered the rumors I had heard whispered in the school hallways about him, stories of broken hearts and lies. I had to dig deeper, and I knew just who to ask. I reached out to Jenna, a girl from the cheer team who had once confided in me about Jason's past conquests. Over a lunch that felt charged with unspoken tension, I kept my voice casual as I asked her about him, pretending to be curious rather than vindictive. She obliged, recounting tales of how Jason had played with the hearts of several girls, leaving them shattered in his wake without a second thought. My heart raced with anticipation as I took in every detail, every sordid story. They began to formulate a plan in my mind, a way to strike back at Mia without revealing my hand just yet. I spent hours assembling evidence, screenshots of messages, whispered confessions, and even a few candid photos I'd gathered from social media. Each piece felt like a dagger, a testament to the truth that lay beneath Jason's polished exterior. I could almost feel the weight of it in my hands, and the thrill of revenge electrified my veins. But as my plan started to take shape, the escalation took a darker turn. I began to notice the changes in myself, the way my heart hardened with each passing day. I was consumed, layered in a cold anger that eclipsed my grief. I wasn't just plotting revenge, I was transforming into someone I barely recognized. I would look in the mirror and see the shadows under my eyes and the tightness in my jaw. Where once I had been filled with dreams of artistry, I now saw a girl driven by an insatiable desire for retribution. Then came the moment I had been anxiously waiting for. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, I found myself standing outside the gym, the excitement almost palpable. I had orchestrated my chance, and now it was time to unleash my plan. During basketball practice, I sent a message to Mia anonymously, teasing her with the promise of some interesting news about Jason. I could picture her face as she read the message, confusion and curiosity mingling in her expression. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly drowned out by the thrill of what I had set in motion. I watched as she paced outside the gym, her phone glued to her ear, desperately trying to decipher who had sent the message. My heart raced with every moment of uncertainty, and the satisfaction of knowing I had her on edge was intoxicating. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, everything spiraled. Mia confronted me the following day, her eyes blazing with rage and hurt. "Did you send that message?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. For a fleeting second, guilt lanced through me. I had been so focused on my revenge that I hadn't considered the ramifications. But the answer was clear, I couldn't back down now. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling within. "But you should really find out who it was." I watched as realization dawned on her, the flicker of fear in her eyes igniting my sense of satisfaction. But that satisfaction quickly turned to dread as I began to see the consequences of it. Was the day after Mia confronted me that everything changed. I was sitting in my room, the soft glow of my desk lamp illuminating the pages of my sketchbook, but I barely noticed. I was lost in thought, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through my veins. I could still see the anger and betrayal etched across her face, and it stirred something within me, a mixture of exhilaration and dread. This was no longer just a plan of revenge, it was becoming an obsession. The phone buzzed next to me, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a group chat with a few remaining friends from my art club. They were talking about a party at Jason's house that weekend, a gathering that would mark the height of his and Mia's new relationship. As I read through their messages, a wave of disgust washed over me. The world was eager to celebrate their love, but all I could think about was how blind they all were to the truth. It felt like a sick joke, and I was the punchline. Suddenly it clicked, the opportunity was right in front of me. I had been so focused on exposing Jason's past to Mia that I had forgotten the bigger picture. This wasn't just about teaching her a lesson, it was about reclaiming my identity. I could turn the attention of our peers onto her, onto the very relationship she held so dear. If I played my cards right, I could make Jason an outcast, and in the process, ruin Mia's precious fairy tale. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but there was a strange sense of clarity that accompanied it. This was my moment. I could feel the thrill pulsing through me, the darkness that had settled in my heart igniting into a reckless flame of determination. I wasn't just fighting for revenge, I was fighting for my voice, for my story, for the girl I once was, the girl who had stood by Mia through everything only to watch her shatter our friendship for a fleeting romance. That Friday evening, as I prepared for the party, a storm brewed inside me. I chose my outfit carefully, slipping into a fitted black dress that made me feel powerful and fierce. I wanted to represent the part of me that had been buried by Mia's betrayal, the part that was ready to stand tall and reclaim my life. I adorned myself with silver jewelry, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped my heart. When I arrived at Jason's house, I let the chaos of the party wash over me, loud music, laughter, and the heady scent of cheap cologne filling the air. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I was invigorated. I scanned the room, looking for Mia, and there she was, radiant under the twinkling lights, her laughter ringing out like a siren's call. Jason had his arm wrapped around her shoulder, and she looked blissful, utterly oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was not that shy, heartbroken girl anymore. I was the architect of my own destiny, and this night would be my canvas. I made my way towards the snack table, where a few of my classmates were gathered. I had spent the last few days gathering pieces of Jason's past, and now it was time to unleash the storm. I casually brought up the rumors swirling around Jason's reputation, stories of broken hearts, lies, and betrayal. At first, it was just small talk, but as the conversation flowed naturally, I dropped hints of my own experiences with him. You know, I heard he ghosted his last girlfriend the moment he met Mia. Can you believe that? I smirked, watching as the initial surprise morphed into intrigue. The whispers grew louder, and soon enough, I noticed a few more pairs of ears perk up, drawn in by the gravity of the tales I spun. With every word, I could feel the momentum building, a tidal wave of attention shifting away from Mia and onto Jason. The laughter faded as those around me began to absorb the information, their expressions turning from amusement to concern, and it felt like a drug coursing through my veins. When Mia finally caught wind of what was happening, her expression shifted from joy to disbelief. She moved through the crowd, her eyes darting from face to face, trying to figure out what was going wrong. I could see the realization dawning on her, a sense of betrayal creeping into her features as she pieced together the fragments of gossip swirling around her. At that moment, I felt a jolt of satisfaction ripple through me. I was no longer just a background character in her story, I was the author of my own narrative. I could see the seeds of doubt creeping into her heart, and with each passing moment, I reveled in as the party unfolded around me. I clutched my drink tightly, feeling the cool condensation trickle down the glass. My heart raced, not with fear, but with exhilarating anticipation. I had constructed my revenge plan meticulously, and now the pieces were all falling into place. First, I needed to ensure that Jason's reputation was front and center. I had already laid the groundwork with my classmates, and now it was time for the final act. I glanced over at them. Mia was still oblivious to the chaos brewing around her, her laughter echoing in my ears like a haunting reminder of what I had lost. I would ensure that she caught the tide of gossip building against Jason, and before the night was over, she would be questioning everything. The first step was simple, I would plant the seed of doubt in Mia's mind. I casually strolled over to where she was laughing with some of her friends, the confident facade I had built wrapping around me like armor. As I approached, I made sure to catch her eye, smiling just enough to feign friendliness. "Hey, Mia. Can we talk for a second?" I asked, my voice light but firm. She looked surprised but nodded, her eyes darting to Jason, who was obliviously immersed in conversation with some of his teammates. We stepped a little away from the crowd, and I could see the curiosity etched on her face. "What's up?" she asked, a hint of tension underlying her cheerful tone. "Have you heard the rumors about Jason?" I asked, feigning innocence. "I mean, it seems like everyone is talking about him tonight." Her expression shifted slightly, confusion mingling with the flicker of anxiety. "What do you mean?" she asked, tilting her head. "Oh, nothing too serious," I said, letting the tension build. "Just some things I've heard about how he treated his last girlfriend. You know, things that might make you think twice." I could see her heart start to race, the smile fading as doubt crept into her mind. What do you mean? What did he do? She pressed, her voice almost a whisper now. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice conspiratorially. I heard he ghosted her right after they got together, left her completely crushed. It's weird, right? You think he'd be different with you, but... I let the sentence hang in the air, watching as her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Mia's eyes widened, and a panic began to pour across her face. Ruth, are you serious? She demanded, desperation bleeding into her tone. Just something to keep in mind, Mia. You deserve someone who values you, you know? I said, trying to sound like the caring friend I once was. But underneath it all, there was a thrill coursing through me. I was planting seeds of doubt, and they were taking root with every word. Next, I needed to enlist a few key people to help amplify the gossip. I made my way back to the snack table, where Jenna was chatting with a couple of other girls from the cheer team. I had gotten close to Jenna over the past week, and I knew she had a big mouth. Hey, did you hear what Mia just found out about Jason? I asked casually, leaning against the table. What? Jenna asked, intrigued. I smiled, letting the rumor slip from my lips like a delicious secret. I just told her about how he treated his last girlfriend, and I'm pretty sure it's not the first time he's done it. It's going around, you know? Jenna's eyes sparkled, and the other girls leaned in, eager to hear more. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the hunger for drama igniting in their eyes. I heard he's been playing girls left and right, one of them chimed in, and soon the conversation spiraled, with each girl adding her own tidbit, twisting the narrative to further tarnish Jason's image. As the whispers spread through the party, I watched the energy shift. The laughter and merriment faded, replaced by a growing tension. I could feel the anticipation building inside me, a deliciously vindictive thrill. Mia was in the center of it all, oblivious to the storm swirling around her. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to put everything into motion. I spotted Jason across the room, laughing with a group of jocks, completely unaware of what was happening around him. I approached him, wearing a practiced smile as I leaned in. Hey, Jason. Can I grab you for a sec? I asked, my tone friendly but purposeful. He raised an eyebrow but followed me away from the group. What's up? I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I led Jason away from the crowd, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment I had carefully orchestrated, the tipping point where everything I had planned would collide. He looked at me with that charming, disarming smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. What's going on, Ruth? He asked, his tone light, but I could sense an undercurrent of curiosity. I had rehearsed what I would say, but as I stood there, the gravity of the situation settled over me like a thick fog. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of confidence I could muster. I think you need to know what's being said about you tonight, I started, keeping my voice steady. There are rumors spreading about how you treated your last girlfriend, and honestly, it's not looking good. His smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. What the hell are you talking about? He retorted, his posture stiffening. That's ridiculous. Oh, it's definitely not ridiculous, I continued, my voice low and deliberate. People are saying you ghosted her and moved on to Mia without a second thought. It's making waves, Jason. Do you really want that kind of reputation? I could see the realization wash over him, his expression shifting from dismissal to concern. The room around us faded into a blur, the laughter and music muted as I watched the gears turn in his mind. He opened his mouth, likely to protest, but the words caught in his throat as he caught sight of Mia, who was standing just a few feet away, her face pale as she overheard our conversation. Mia's eyes widened in shock, and I could feel the tension hanging between us, thick like a taut wire ready to snap. I could see the panic settling in her, a realization dawning that whatever fairy tale she had imagined with Jason was now crumbling like fragile glass. The crowd was slowly gathering, drawn by the tension in the air. Whispers began to ripple through the party, curiosity mingling with concern, a palpable energy that electrified the atmosphere. I could feel the eyes of onlookers boring into me, their attention shifting like a tide towards the unfolding drama. I had designed this moment to make waves, and the currents were crashing against the shore. Ruth, this isn't funny, Jason said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. You're trying to stir something up that isn't there. What's wrong with you? The defiance in his tone ignited a fire within me. I'm just trying to make sure Mia knows the truth. I shot back, my emotions spilling over. You think you can play with people's hearts and not face the consequences? You're wrong. You need to own up to your actions. Mia stepped forward, her voice trembling as she cut in. What did you say? I could see the hurt and confusion written across her face, a painful contradiction to the joy she had radiated earlier that evening. Just telling Jason about how people are talking, I said with a sweet smile, letting the satisfaction sink in. You were just so happy, but maybe it's time you knew the truth about him. Jason's expression twisted into a mask of anger and annoyance. This is ridiculous, he spat, but the way his gaze flickered back to Mia told me my words were sinking in. I didn't ghost anyone. That's not how it happened. Then what is the truth? I challenged, my adrenaline surging. The crowd had grown, everyone leaning in, and I felt a surge of power with all eyes on us. You can't just dismiss the hurt you've caused. You think it's a game? Mia's face was a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, confusion, and the flicker of realization that perhaps this relationship wasn't as perfect as she wanted it to be. The moment was becoming unbearable, and I could see the internal battle raging within her. You really think I'm like that? Jason sneered, but the bravado was fading. I care about you, Mia. I thought you knew that. Then why are people saying these things? She shot back, her voice trembling with disbelief. Why is everyone talking about it? A murmur rippled through the crowd, fueled by the growing tension. Jason opened his mouth, likely to defend himself again, but I wasn't about to let him twist the narrative back in his favor. I leaned in closer, my voice steady, because it's the truth, Jason. You can't hide behind your charm and good looks forever. Mia's eyes were darting between the aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion movie, every moment stretching out as the tension coagulated in the air. The party that had been filled with laughter and light turned into something starkly different, a crucible of confrontation. As the crowd closed in, their faces alight with curiosity and a hint of concern, I felt an electric charge in the atmosphere, a tangible sense of reckoning. Jason's bravado crumbled. He glanced at Mia, his confident facade cracking under the pressure of her gaze, which was filled with betrayal and anger. Mia, just listen. It's not, he began, but the words fell flat. The truth I had exposed had ignited a wildfire that he could no longer control. Mia, however, seemed to be caught in a storm of disbelief. She turned toward me, her expression shifting into one of grave realization. Ruth, is this true? Did he really ghost someone? She asked, her voice trembling, the vulnerability seeping through her bravado. The room echoed with whispers, people leaning in and exchanging knowing glances. I could see the pieces falling into place, the spell of infatuation dissipating like mist under the sun. Mia, I said gently, you deserve to know what's happening behind closed doors. You deserve to be with someone who values you. With every passing second, the laughter ebbed into an uncomfortable silence, all eyes glued to the unraveling drama before them. I felt the adrenaline still pulsing through my veins, a potent mix of revenge and vindication. But then, something shifted, a pang of guilt snaked through the thrill of victory, squeezing my heart tight. Mia's expression twisted as realization flooded her face. I can't believe you, she stammered, the earlier warmth in her demeanor evaporating into the cold night air. You're supposed to be my friend, Ruth. You're supposed to support me, not tear me down. Her words struck like a slap. I had become the very thing I despised, a source of pain, just like she had been to me. But the anger in me fought back. You think this is about you? You disregarded our friendship for the sake of a fleeting romance. You humiliated me, I shouted, the rawness of my hurt spilling out in every syllable. I never meant to hurt you, she cried, her voice catching in her throat. I just wanted to be happy. And at what cost? I countered, the bitterness clawing at my throat. The crowd was hanging on every word, the tension palpable. I realized then that I had not only sought revenge against Jason but against Mia too, and it was beginning to feel hollow. As the confrontation escalated, Jason attempted to salvage his image, throwing his arm around Mia in a desperate show of affection, but it only backfired. "Come on, babe, don't listen to her," he pleaded. "You know how people exaggerate." But the trust that had once characterized Mia's eyes was replaced by a haunting uncertainty. "I need to think," she finally whispered, stepping away from him, the weight of the moment crashing down on both of us like a tidal wave. The crowd began to murmur again, the gravity of the revelation settling in. In that moment, I had won my battle, but at what cost? I watched as Mia walked away, her head held high but her shoulders trembling. The realization that I had pushed her away, that I had become the villain in this twisted tale of betrayal, hit me hard. The exhilaration of revenge faded into a bitter taste of regret. As the party began to dwindle, the laughter and music replaced by hushed conversations and uncertain glances, I felt a hollowness within me, one that no amount of vindication could fill. I was left standing there, surrounded by the remnants of what had been, and the fragmentation of my friendship with Mia was carved into my heart, a scar I would carry forever. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from that party echoed throughout our school. Mia had distanced herself not just from Jason but from the circles we once shared. I saw her in the hallways, a specter of the girl she used to be, lost, confused, and alone. The whispers had turned into a cacophony of speculation, painting her in shades of blame and sorrow. I tried reaching out, sending texts to check on her, but each message went unanswered. The silence cut deeper than any betrayal. I had fought so hard to reclaim my voice, to exact my revenge, but in doing so, I had lost my friend. I spent nights tossing and turning, haunted by the specter of what could have been. I painted frantically, filling my canvases with swirling colors that mirrored the
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer living in the heart of Seattle. The city's skyline always makes me feel small, but that wasn't the only thing dwarfing me during that stormy season of my life. I never thought I'd find myself caught in a web of deception, but there I was, blinded by love, my heart heavy with betrayal. I want to share my story of heartbreak and revenge, but honestly, it's still hard for me to unpack all of it. It feels like I'm pulling at threads of a tapestry I thought had been woven with honesty, only to discover they were nothing but frayed lies. At the center of this story is Ryan, my ex-boyfriend, who at first seemed perfect. He was charming, funny, and had that electric smile that made my heart skip a beat. We met at a local coffee shop, where instead of my usual black coffee, I ordered a caramel macchiato on a whim, a decision that changed the course of my life. Ryan was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, intelligent, and always ready with a witty quip to lighten the mood. I let my guard down as he skillfully navigated through my trust and insecurities, wrapping me in a cocoon of his affection. Little did I know, I was spiraling deep into a relationship built on manipulation and deceit. Then there was Jessica, my best friend since childhood. We swore we would always have each other's backs, through thick and thin. But as fate would have it, she became a pivotal character in this twisted tale, and not in the way I had ever imagined. I never thought I'd feel the sting of betrayal from her, a friend who knew my deepest secrets and insecurities, yet became unwittingly entangled in a plot that would ultimately break my heart. As I sit here, reminiscing about those harrowing days, I can still feel the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me like a lead blanket. The city lights flicker outside my window, but they pale in comparison to the fire that ignited within me. It's a fire fueled by anger and a desire for justice, a commitment to reclaim my narrative when I learned that the people I trusted the most were nothing but puppeteers in a cruel game. This is not a story of petty grievances or misunderstandings. No, this is a tale of betrayal so deep that it left scars on my heart and unmoored my trust in the very fabric of my life. The first cracks in my seemingly perfect world appeared one evening when I noticed Ryan behaving differently. He would receive late-night messages, his eyes darting away when I entered the room, as if I was a detective who might expose a hidden crime. I chalked it up to stress from work. He was ambitious, after all, always chasing some elusive promotion. But the nagging feeling in my stomach grew heavier with each passing day. Then one fateful Saturday afternoon, while cleaning out the clutter of my apartment, I stumbled upon a small envelope tucked away in a drawer. It was addressed to Ryan but had no return address. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a neatly folded card that carried the unmistakable scent of perfume. As I read the words scrawled in elegant handwriting, my world shattered. It was a love letter, one that spoke of passion, longing, and secrets. It was from Jessica. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent countless hours confiding in her about my dreams of a future with Ryan, sharing my fears and insecurities as I built a life with him, only to find out she had been orchestrating a different kind of symphony altogether. A sick feeling of disbelief washed over me. How could she? I felt my heart sink into a bottomless pit of anguish, confusion, and rage. How could my best friend, the one person I thought would never betray me, be complicit in the manipulation that was unraveling before my eyes? As the days rolled into weeks, I confronted Ryan. The look in his eyes shifted from surprise to guilt as he stammered apologies, trying to explain away his betrayal. It was a mistake, he pleaded, it didn't mean anything. But it did mean something. To me, it meant a lifetime of trust was being tossed aside like yesterday's trash. While Ryan was trying to justify his actions, I couldn't shake the image of Jessica's face, the one person I had let into my heart. I realized that the very foundation of our friendship was built on a lie. The sweet memories we shared, the laughter we echoed through the years, it all felt tainted, as if someone had spilled ink on a cherished photograph. Everything I had shared with her now felt raw and exposed, like a wound that refused to heal. In the aftermath of that confrontation, I became a shadow of my former self. I deleted their numbers, I unfollowed them on social media, but there was no magic button to erase the memories. I spiraled into a pit of despair, replaying their betrayal over and over again in my mind. I found myself questioning every interaction, every moment we had shared. Was it all an act? Was I a fool for believing in their love? It wasn't just the emotional toll that drained me, my work began to suffer. I was a graphic designer, someone whose creativity relied on clarity and inspiration, and yet, I found myself staring blankly at my screen, unable to summon a single spark of imagination. My colleagues noticed the change, and whispers of concern, tinged with pity, followed me around the office. "Is everything okay with Kimberly?" they would ask, but all I could muster was a forced smile that felt like a brittle mask. As my world dimmed, Ryan seemed to thrive in the chaos he had created. It was infuriating. He started dating someone new, a girl from his office, someone who resembled Jessica in looks and demeanor. My stomach turned every time I saw their photos on social media, each like and comment cutting deeper than the last. It was like watching a movie where the villain was thriving after destroying the protagonist's life. It felt so surreal, watching him move on so effortlessly while I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered self-esteem. But the worst part came when Jessica reached out, a week after the storm broke. She texted me, apologizing profusely, insisting she was sorry and wanted to talk. I was paralyzed with anger. How dare she think I would ever want to hear her excuses? I thought about our shared memories, the trust we had built over the years, and how quickly it had all crumbled beneath the weight of their betrayal. I ignored her message, feeling the simmering rage bubbling within me. It felt like betrayal had become a poison coursing through my veins, and I had no idea how to extract it. Days turned into weeks, and I began to see a therapist who helped me sift through the pain and confusion. "You can't control their actions, but you can control how you respond to them," she advised gently. The words resonated deep within me, igniting a flicker of defiance that had seemingly extinguished under the weight of betrayal. For the first time since everything unraveled, I felt an ember of determination kindling in my chest. The turning point came late one night while I was scrolling through social media, seeking solace in the digital noise of the outside world. I stumbled upon a photo of Ryan and his new girlfriend, faces illuminated by a golden sunset, as they shared a kiss that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being a victim of their lies. I was done wallowing in a pit of despair. It was time for me to reclaim my power. I thought back to everything. A flood of memories washed over me, filled with his sweet words and her laughter, and I felt this burning need for justice. They thought they could shatter me, but they had underestimated my resolve. That night, I realized I could turn this pain into something greater. Instead of allowing betrayal to break me, I could let it fuel my fire. I spent the next few days channeling all that rage and hurt into a plan. I harnessed my skills as a graphic designer, creating a series of illustrations that reflected the turbulent emotions I had buried for too long. Each design became a cathartic outlet, a way for me to express the hurt, the betrayal, and ultimately, the empowerment I was beginning to feel. With every stroke of my pen, I felt lighter. I envisioned a series of art pieces that would encapsulate my experience, but more importantly, I envisioned a way to turn the narrative around. But my plan didn't stop at art. I devised a strategy that would intertwine my designs with a public reveal, an art exhibition titled Behind the Masks. I decided to showcase my journey through these illustrations, from the joyful highs to the devastating lows, as a way of reclaiming the narrative they had stolen from me. I would let the world see how they had hurt me, but also how I had risen from the ashes of that pain. In the weeks leading up to the event, I transformed my apartment into a makeshift studio, working late into the night. I poured every ounce of my heartbreak into those pieces. I designed graphics that represented the duplicity of love and friendship, depicting broken hearts with strings attached, and vibrant colors contrasting the darkness that had pervaded my life. My artwork became my armor,